Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The death toll in Syria and Turkey is now past 20,000.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 10th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Tamsin. Here are your top stories this morning.
Well, the humanitarian crisis following the earthquake that rocked Turkey and Syria is continuing to devastate both countries. Hundreds of thousands of people are now homeless, with the Red Cross also warning of freezing temperatures and water shortages in the coming days.
Labour's Ashley Dalton has won the West Lancashire by-election after securing a majority of over 8,000 votes. But is this an early indicator of how a future general election could look? We'll bring you the results of our GB News People's Poll to show if the rest of the country feels the same way.
And half-term is approaching for students and parents across the country. We'll be bringing you the best tips for resting and relaxing during the week, well, perhaps without getting wrapped up in any travel chaos.
As ever, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, of course, we have to start with the devastating earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria earlier this week. It is on course to become one of the deadliest in a decade.
The death toll has now risen to more than 20,000 following the catastrophic 7.8 magnitude quake.
However, fears are now turning to the freezing temperatures as countless survivors face homelessness, with the UK sending thousands of thermal blankets overnight.
Well, joining us this morning is Umut Sevdi-Tangor, a freelance journalist currently in Turkey. Good morning to you, Umut. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Now, the window for finding survivors must be closing now. Just tell us what's happening there now. Are rescuers still searching?
The rescue still searching, and aid is still on the fields, and people are coming from all over the world, like United Kingdom and Israel and Holland, mostly from United Nations are here. Right now, what's happening on the field? Let me start with Hatay, because Hatay is suffering more than other 9 cities. I know we cannot divide the other 10 cities, but the Hatay, since from the Monday, since the earthquake, is very hard to reach, hard to send to aid, and hard to reach for the rescue team, because the whole city is just like devastatingly is demolished. There's no Hatay city anymore, including its district like Antakya. They are very big districts like Reyhanlı. We are talking about more than 1 million population living in this area, and hardly reaching the rescue team. Imagine like 20 buildings is 20 buildings, only one building out of 20 can reach rescue team, and there is still voice coming out from the rubbles. We are already past, I was calculating before contacting with you, we are at the 101st hour right now, and just before I contacted with you, just before I joined your show, they rescued two victims from the rubbles, one in Hatay, one in Gaziantep. So it's showing us there are still people, there are still life, and they are struggling to get out from the rubbles. But unfortunately, there are not enough rescue team to reach every single building in Hatay and every single building in Kahramanmaraş and every single building in Gaziantep. This is the huge, devastating disaster in Turkey.
It's also the problem, isn't there, Umut, that this is going to turn into a humanitarian disaster for everyone who has lost their homes, who has been displaced, unless massive amounts of aid and support can get in quickly.
Listen, I just give you the population of Hatay, right? I told you the over 1 million population live there. Now we don't know how many. If we say half of it is living right now, so where they are going to be live and where they are going to sleep, basically people are sleeping outside the tents. There are some couple of tent city already established, but not all of them. So we are talking about maybe the million people needs tent city or move to another city, or they have to go and find their relatives, but it's impossible. Unfortunately, there's no coach, there's no buses to carry people also from the cities to another cities. We are talking about maybe over a million people. And also, there is no electricity right now in Hatay. There is no water in Hatay. People suffering with hunger. Seriously, they were asking us bread and water. We are talking about 5 days right now. We are in the fifth days right now, and there's no water in Hatay. Still, unfortunately, I'm smiling, but I'm so angry because there's network provider, too strong network provider is not helping the people to get the connection with their phone. So there's no also network provider to reach Hatay. And also, let me edit this. Why I'm talking about Hatay and underlying the city, because yesterday Şanlıurfa and Kilis, the rescue operations is finished, and the teams are start moving to Hatay to help other cities. So 2 cities already finished, Kilis and Şanlıurfa. Now they are helping to other cities to rescue people from the rubbles.
Okay, I mean, look, it's really important that we talk to you and find out what is happening there, even though it's clearly very difficult for you and everyone involved. Umut Sevdi Tangor, really good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Isn't it? I mean, it's just so hard to get your head around some of the figures there, and we know that the humanitarian crisis is going to affect millions of people actually in the wake of all of this.
Watch. Very difficult.
Anyway, if you're affected by that, we'd love to hear from you. Or if you just want to wish everybody well, it'd be good to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Right, let's bring you up to date with what's going on today. Labour have held West Lancashire after Ashley Dalton was voted in as the country's newest MP. Miss Dalton secured 8,000 more votes than her Conservative counterpart for the region.
Lancashire police say their search for missing mum of 2 Nicola Bulley has moved now towards the sea. The force says it's searching further downstream where the River Wyre becomes tidal. The 45-year-old was last seen 13 days ago walking her dog.
Meningitis cases across England have more than doubled in a year. Charity Meningitis Now says 205 instances were recorded in 2022. That's 125 cases more than the previous year. Now we can bring you the latest results of the GB News People's Poll.
Yeah, now the Conservative vote is flat. Again, 21% this week, leaving Labour with half of the national vote. That's according to our poll.
This comes just after the West Lancashire by-election, which saw Labour's Ashley Dalton voted in as the new MP, who secured 8,000 more votes than her Conservative counterpart for the region.
So, how can the Conservatives expect to come back from this historic defeat? Let's talk to journalist and author Julie Cook, who's here. Julie, good to see you this morning. I mean, look, by-elections are not reliable. I mean, the turnout for this one was just over 30%. Nevertheless, a 30% swing to Labour to help them retain that seat. It's the swing which is going to be the concern, isn't it, for national politicians?
Exactly, it's the swing. It's not the numbers, it's the swing. And I think also by-elections are small things, but they're also very indicative sometimes of how people are feeling. Obviously, that area, West Lancashire, was very Labour. It was a stronghold for 17 years with Rosie Cooper. So it's not surprising that Labour have got back in with Ashley Dalton. But, as you say, it's the swing and it's indicative of people's feelings and the sentiment, perhaps indicative of what might happen at the next election.
And of course, the local elections coming up in May. I mean, the Tory party, it's set to be a difficult time for them. What are they going to do to bring it round? Exactly.
I mean, as we've seen in the People's Poll vote, it's 50% in favour of Labour. I mean, that's huge. No one would have conceived that happening in recent times. And 21% Conservatives. I mean, that's a massive, massive difference. And I think if that's how things are now, I mean, if they were to call a general election now, it would be disastrous, let's face it, if they were to call it tomorrow.
I mean, those figures would narrow a fair chunk. They always do in a general election, don't they? People sort of think, well, I'm going to have to stick with what I know or what I think is best for the country. But as you say, what seems to be... what we've been reporting on for weeks and weeks and weeks now is the flat vote of the Tories. It would seem whatever is happening in government, it's not winning back any sort of support.
I think that's the thing. It's how flat it is. It's kind of still water, isn't it? It's nothing they seem to do at the moment brings people back. You know, all the things that people talk about, the triple lock, this, that, they've had various problems with sort of sleaze lately and things like that. There's always another stumbling block. And I think it's personality as well. I mean, Rishi Sunak is their leader, but, you know, personality politics comes into it a little bit as well, doesn't it, always? And when he's sort of opposite Keir Starmer in the House of Commons, Keir Starmer kind of wipes the floor with him lately, I think, sometimes. I mean, occasionally Rishi looks sort of like a told-off schoolboy, and I think people see that, and people see that confidence in Labour.
And also got a few inquiries to clear up. We've got Dominic Raab, that inquiry. We've also had Nadeem Zahawi. Do you think that all plays into it as well?
Of course. I mean, I think Rishi, I mean, love him or loathe him. He's had a lot to deal with, hasn't he, in terms of problems like that. And people, as I say, people notice that, people remember that. And people are very unhappy at the moment about the energy crisis, about having been through COVID, all the awful things we've all been through. People don't want sleaze and problems and issues and things to worry about. They want someone they can trust. And I think this flatlining at the moment is indicative of just the general, I don't know, despair.
But is it a sign that actually things are OK? Rather than looking on the negative side, what it's not doing is dipping, right? And Rishi hasn't given us anything to smile about at the moment because he's you know, if you follow the government line, what they're saying is we're trying to stabilise the economy, we're trying to get things back under control. So we haven't got anything to smile about yet, but the idea is keep it all level now and things will get better towards the end of the year when we're closer to a general election.
Perhaps that is. Perhaps it's sort of marathon-style psychology, you know, keep a steady pace and then at the end really go for it. I mean, hopefully that's what they plan to do. As you say, there's certainly nothing exciting happening at the moment to bring people back, but if that's the sort of keep things as well as we can now and then hopefully give a push towards the end, maybe. But, you know, where are we? It's in a year and a half, isn't it, the general election? It seems a long way away, but it's not really in the scheme of things. It will come around quicker than everybody thinks.
It's interesting, actually, just looking at the poll in all this. What is interesting, because you mentioned triple lock, right? Because that's crucial for so many people. And actually, the grey vote is very important,
yes,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, according to our poll, people don't generally believe the triple lock will exist in 5 years. Now, whoever's in government, presumably.
Yeah. I mean, this poll was really interesting. Only 11% of people polled in this said that the triple lock will be here in 5 years, which I think Well, the triple lock has cost the government so much more than they ever imagined with the inflation that's going on at the moment, obviously. I mean, will it last? I mean, can it last, particularly with our ageing population? But as you say, that grey vote, as we call it, is hugely important for traditional Conservative voters. So, yeah, it's a real sticking one, that one, the triple lock.
Yeah, I mean, presumably, if inflation comes down, as it should do, well, of course, triple lock and everything else becomes a lot cheaper to maintain. I mean, that's the ideal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's only because we have this unprecedented high inflation at the moment, which is making this seem so untenable and that it can't last, obviously. But if you think of things now and think in 5 years' time, if it's still this bad, it can't exist, can it? I mean, we can't keep up with that level of inflation for an ageing population.
No.
Of course, got the budget coming up in March. Could that do anything, do you think, for the government?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, it seems so near and yet it's so far, isn't it? There's so much more that could happen between now and then. As you say, people who vote Conservative traditionally are the older cohort at the moment, aren't they? And they're the people they need to keep sweet. So, yeah.
We shall see. Watch all that with interest. Julie, we'll catch up with you in the next hour. Thanks very much indeed. Now, the Prince and Princess of Wales surprised local people in Falmouth yesterday as they made their first joint engagement as the new, and forget about this, don't we, they are the new Duke and Duchess of Cornwall.
Their Royal Highnesses learnt about the region's maritime heritage and met Cornwall's next generation of talented sports stars. Our royal reporter Cameron Walker was there to witness it all.
Cornwall's a county with ancient links to royalty. Now, a new generation watches over 52,000 hectares of English land. Prince William is now responsible for the Duchy of Cornwall, providing an income for his family worth millions of pounds each year. Prince William will want to make a positive difference to communities here. He and Princess Catherine visited the National Maritime Museum of Cornwall yesterday to learn more about its coastal heritage, including royal heritage from a 14-foot dinghy called Kiwi. Presented to the late Queen and Prince Philip as a wedding present from New Zealand's Navy, the Duke and Duchess met volunteers like Phil, working on its refurbishment.
I think it was the Sea Scouts had built it in New Zealand and they then gave it to Prince Philip, which he sailed a few times while he was down there.
The King has passed his duchy knowledge on to his son, who in turn spends time with students developing seaworthy skills from generations gone by. And then this. Princess Catherine reunited with her former school teacher, who now volunteers at the museum, a window to her past. But it's the future that featured heavily on this visit. William and Catherine met Daisy, a gifted pentathlete who received funding from Youth and Talented Cornwall. With support, she's hoping to one day compete in the Olympics for Great Britain.
Without the funding, I wouldn't be able to travel. So since we're in Cornwall, there's nothing down here. So travelling up to Redditch, it's camp every month where I get trained by like elitist coaches.
Poppy, a talented dinghy sailor, also received funding and met the royal couple.
They're both really nice to talk to and friendly and opening. And I think they're both into the outdoors a lot as well and think it's really good for your mental health and definitely encourage lots of people to do it.
With new titles comes new responsibility. Not everyone was pleased to see them. An anti-monarchy protester was led away by police. The prince is expected to return to Cornwall many times as heir to the throne, making sure the duchy does provide meaningful value to the locals he now serves. Cameron Walker, GB News, Falmouth.
I'd like to meet them, you know.
Oh, me too.
It'd be just nice.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
I'd really... You know, the other thing is, now here's a question for you. I'm going to Scotland next week, right?
Okay.
Because I'm from Cumbria, which is right next to Scotland, if your geography isn't very good, I've always sort of thought, well, I'm virtually Scottish. Can I get away with wearing a kilt?
Yeah.
I've always wanted a kilt.
They're very smart, aren't they?
I think they just look really cool. But someone's saying in my ear, have I got the legs? Of course I've got the legs. But the question is, as someone who is English, can I wear... OK, if you're in Scotland, let me know if you think it's appropriate or not.
I think you can, but I'm not Scottish, so...
No. I just really fancy it. I mean, with the other, where would I ever wear it? Let's say if you bought a kilt and they're not cheap,
if you go to Scotland...
It would be quite nice to I want to roam around the Scottish countryside.
No one will know that you're not Scottish.
No, this is true. I can do the accent.
Yeah.
There you go. Anyway, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Don't go anywhere, though, because when we come back, we're going to be seeing how parents can help students recover and reset during the half-term break. First, though, here's your weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's yet another cold start in the south, with temperatures below freezing in many places, cloudier and milder elsewhere. And then for the vast majority, we're going to see that cloud spread across the UK through the day. At the moment, high pressure sits to the south of the UK. That's led to light winds and clear spells overnight in the south. But further north, a blustery wind coming from the southwest has brought a lot of cloud cover and some persistent rain over western hills of England, Wales, and more especially northern and western Scotland. Some heavier rain for a time for the Highlands. However, heading into the afternoon, whilst cloud spills southeastwards, the rain in the north will tend to ease. It will become more confined to western hills. Some breaks emerging in the northeast of Scotland, and towards the southeast we keep some brighter spells as well, where we get some brightness, 11, 12 Celsius possible, and fairly widely 9, 10, 11 degrees. So above average for the time of year, relatively mild, although with a lot of cloud cover and a keen breeze. That breeze will be gusty over the hills of northern England and Scotland. I don't think it will feel especially pleasant. During the night time on Friday night, we'll see a few clear spells across southern areas. Again, that will lead to a touch of frost in places, but less widespread compared with recent mornings. More widespread will be low cloud and some hill fog, especially for Wales and the southwest. And we'll continue to see a lot of cloud for Scotland, that cloud covering the hills of western Scotland and giving a few spots of rain and drizzle. 1 or 2 spots of rain and drizzle further south, predominantly over, say, the Welsh mountains and around coastal areas. But actually the trend into the afternoon on Saturday is for some sunshine to emerge across South Wales and the southwest. 12 or 13 Celsius where this happens, and northeast Scotland will see some brighter weather, 12 or 13 again. And so for the vast majority, actually, Saturday will be cloudy but relatively mild. We'll see some breaks in the cloud later. Sunday starts off with a few fog patches, particularly again towards the southwest, but another mostly dry day is expected.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
6:23, very good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Tamsin. And here's what else we've got coming up for you today.
At 7:45, we'll have all the reaction to the exclusive interview that John Cleese gave to Dan Wootton last night. We'll cover everything from Faulty Towers returning to what to expect from his new GB News show.
Then at 8:15, we'll bring you the latest from the ambulance staff strike. Our reporter live on the picket line in Waterloo to try and find out the reasons behind this walkout and if we can expect more action over the spring. Tell you what, though, there's lots of you up bright and early this morning getting in touch. Good morning to you. I love it when people get in touch. It's a lovely thing about this show. And, of course, they're saying, oh, David, what a breath of fresh air to see Tamsin on a Friday morning.
Thank you, David.
We worked together, didn't we, years ago?
We did.
And so it's been nice to pass in the corridors here over the last couple of years. And it was like, well, why don't we do another one together?
Why not? A nice little reunion.
Well, there you go, you see. It's all very nice. Mind you, it's last time since I've seen you... Married, children,
Three
all the rest
children
of
later,
it. Three children. How are you going to cope with half-term?
Here for a break, because half-term starts today. Here for a break tomorrow and Sunday. Yeah, half-term's never that relaxing, to be honest.
I was going to say, there's all this focus on children's mental health, which, of course, is important. But for things to be good at home, the parents have to be all right as well, don't they?
Absolutely. They say, you know, with mums, you should start with your me time, and if you're OK, then your kids will be OK, which is why half-term can be a challenge, because actually you've got to come up with stuff to do. It's busy. It's there isn't always that much me time.
No. Look, if you've got any plans or concerns about half-term, get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. In regard to Turkey, Mark and Kyle, morning to you, gents. They're saying we're in Turkey with friends and people in the UK have been asking if we're OK, which we are. The centre of the earthquake was 14 hours' drive from us. But even so, it must be concerning, mustn't it? Because it's aftershocks and whether there's going to be a shift in the epicentre and all the rest of it.
Absolutely. Thank you for getting in touch from over there, Mark and Kyle. People's poll. What have you been saying about that? Con?
Yeah, let's start with Con.
Con says Sunak has been in over 100 days, not one boat sent back, not one strike sorted out, no serious decrease in petrol prices, no real deals done by Brexit. They deserve to be wiped out, and I voted Tory, never again.
I sort of think, what do you expect them to do in the immediate term? I think you've got to play a long game. I understand the frustration, believe you me, but you sort of wonder, you've got to go for the long term, haven't you? And try and sort things out and then try and make things better. But I know that it doesn't help if you're struggling.
And quite a lot of frustration generally this morning. Kevin also saying Labour gets the vote because we're all totally fed up with the incompetence, lies and sleaze.
Yeah, but we're saying we're talking to a Labour MP a little bit later on, and we've been sort of saying in the newsroom, because obviously our job is to challenge people. It doesn't matter what party they're from. Our job is to challenge people. It's like, well, what do you challenge Labour on at the minute? Because they're actually keeping quite quiet about... I mean, why wouldn't you? In the position they're in, their strategy has got to be keep quiet and just wait till, until there's a general election is launched and they have to reveal a manifesto and all the rest of it. But what do you really push them on? Everything seems like an open goal for the Labour Party at the moment. It's very difficult. John says, morning, John, when I speak to people in my community, there's no sense of coming back for the Tories. They've had 13 years under which no one has seen any benefits, more or less the same austerity, and the NHS is getting worse. I think...
Not very happy this morning.
No, I mean, the
NHS...
The NHS is a big one. We keep saying, loads of guests on the show keep saying there needs to be a cross-party committee on the NHS that are in charge of the NHS, so you can actually make long-term decisions that aren't politically judged. Because every party says, stuff needs to be done with the NHS, but then they've only got sort of 5 years to sort it out and then they get judged on it. We need to take that out of party politics, don't we? So people can come up with a 20-year plan. That never seems, that seems very difficult to do.
What we're waiting for.
Yeah. Look, a lot of the news is very depressing today, which is why if you want to talk about something nice like...
Kilts,
whether or not I should wear a kilt, because I really fancy it. It's like costumey sort of things. I like kilts. I really would love a pair of, cowboy boots and a Stetson.
I've got some cowboy boots. Do you like fancy dress then?
Well, no,
fancy dress parties.
I don't. Do you know what? I don't do fancy dress parties. Isn't that strange? But the idea of saying, "Oh, I'll have a pair of cowboy boots." If I was in the States, I'd want to get dressed right up like that. I just would. I don't know why. Where else would you ever wear it?
There's a great shop on the King's Road that sells brilliant cowboy gear.
Really?
Cowboy boots and Stetsons. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yourself down to King's Road.
Couldn't really wear it around town, could I?
Maybe not.
This is the problem. The other thing, this is in the Express today, looking at Disney, 100 years of Disney. And they're saying, well, can it keep going for another 100 years? And they're looking at new films and like another Frozen and all that sort of thing to keep it going. Well, the kids
I know
love it.
Frozen well. Still got the tune, Let It Go.
Yeah, but I wonder if, are you the sort of people who think that's a good thing to do and keep that sort of like the Magic Kingdom alive? Or do you, a bit like me, sort of reflect on those, like Snow White and all those original Disney movies that were...
The oldies were the best, weren't
they? were something magical about them, the way they were drawn and everything, which is so old-fashioned now, but...
Beautifully animated.
I just think there's something quite nice about all of that.
But
if you're a Disney fan, love to hear from you this morning. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Right, more to come, including the biggest stories from today's papers, alongside Liz Kershaw and Andy McDonald.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
6:31. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Tamsin. Kilts, right? Apparently I'm all right to wear a kilt. David says, I'm sure you have Scottish or Irish heritage somewhere that you can wear a kilt. If not, you could wear a non-clan one, like the Edinburgh tartan, or as you're from Cumbria, wear the Submariner's tartan.
Fantastic, David.
It's not a bad idea.
That's brilliant. There you go.
Because they build submarines where I am.
Green light.
Pixie says, I'd love to bump into you wearing your kilt roaming the Scottish countryside. Pixie, behave yourself. And Andrew says, I'm an English Kiwi and wore a kilt at my brother-in-law's wedding in Dundee. There were lots of Swedish guests wearing the kilt as well.
Oh, look, here you go. Bob
go.
the Scot in Stamford. Of course you can wear a kilt, Stephen. Have a look at the Ramsey tartan. Absolutely beautiful.
Oh, right, I will. Well, Bob the Scot. So there you go, Bob. I'll take your word for it. Keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Right, let's take a look at today's front pages. The Times reports that Ukraine is prepared to use British long-range missiles to hit targets in Crimea, the peninsula annexed by Russia in 2014.
The Guardian has a story about a major upheaval in the view taken by the Church of England on same-sex marriage.
The Mail reports that the Treasury was under pressure to cut taxes last night after AstraZeneca criticised how expensive it was to do business in the UK.
The Eye has an exclusive revealing raw sewage from a major HS2 site is being pumped into a river.
The Express says anger is growing because greedy banks are refusing to pass on higher interest rates to savers.
Let's go through the papers now with the assistant editor of the London Financial, Andy McDonald, and legendary broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Morning to you both.
Morning.
Nice to see you, Liz. Let's kick off with the Times, should we? And British long-range missiles, which may be used against Crimea.
First of all, you know the joke, don't you?
What?
Is anything worn under the kilt? No, it's all in perfect working order.
Oh, yeah. Very good, very good.
Yeah, I've got a kilt. I can wear the Wallace tartan because of my granddad. Right. Anyway, I remember my colleague at Radio 1, Bruno Brooks, once said to me, can't be doing with history, it's all in the past. But I think we can learn about it. So, looking at the conflict currently around the Black Sea, Crimea, etc., with the Russians and the Ukrainians. This is I was reading about this, and this is an interesting quote. War fever among the public in Britain and France has been whipped up by the press in both countries to the degree that politicians found it untenable to propose ending the war. Now, when do you think that was in a newspaper article?
Oh, that's Second World War, isn't it?
No. It's October 1953 to February 1856, the Crimean War, which was between Russia and the allies of the United Kingdom, France and the Ottoman Empire, which is Turkey. Topical, because they're in grave trouble at the moment. But it was an absolute disaster. It was the first major war where really heavy artillery was used, you know, explosives, shells, rather than just rifles and, you know, cold steel up them and all the rest of it. But there were 450,000 casualties, and it really solved nothing. We've all heard of the Charge of the Light Brigade. And I just think we have to be really careful, because whilst we realise that it's morally and legally totally wrong for Russia to invade a sovereign country like Ukraine, for us to start sending long-range missiles, our planes, which Zelensky was asking for the other day, is a very highly dangerous move, I think.
Well, it did, but
in escalating the extent of the war. I'm not ruling it out, like Rishi Sunak said, everything's on the table, but it's got to be a military, not a political decision, as per that headline from the papers.
Putin's already...
But, you know, Zelensky said, I'll thank you in advance for your planes. But we have very few fighter planes
Well,
now.
we've got very few tanks. We're sending those.
Yeah, but you need very, very skilled people, trained for years to fly fighter jets.
This is the problem.
We can't send the Ukrainians our fighter jets and say, you Ukrainian lads can jump in and fly them. It takes years to train.
Well, this is it.
We've got to have RAF people willing.
No, we can't have people. We can't have our own people flying them. Training them we can do, but
yeah, but we can't have our own people going there.
No.
And would they be willing to do so anyway? So all I'm saying is, let's do it for the right reasons, which would be militarily tactical, rather than because it's out of sentimentality or misguided.
What do you think, Andy?
Well, I think, you know, it's important that we show support and solidarity to Ukraine, because they're in an awful situation. You know, Russia are invading their sovereign territory. If that were to happen to us, we'd expect our allies across Europe and the West to support us. So, you know, I think it's really quite key and interesting that MPs like John McDonnell and Nadia Whittome, who have been long-time supporters of the Stop the War coalition, have come out and said publicly, we need to support Ukraine. We need to send them the weapons, need to offer them the training, offer them the guidance. I think we do need to continue doing that, and I would encourage Rishi Sunak and the Defence Secretary and those in the Ministry of Defence and the Foreign Office to continue that support.
Yeah, well, if you've got a view on that, it'd be good to hear your thoughts. Can we have a look, talking of all things political, Andy, can we have a look at Dominic Raab? He's spoken in the Telegraph. I mean, he's made it clear, and it's an interesting point. He says, I'm not a bully. I've always acted professionally, but what I do insist on is high standards. Well, that's a fair point, isn't it?
Yeah, it probably is. This was written by Charles Hymas, the Home Affairs editor of the Telegraph. It's made the front page, and it's kind of just said he's just holding his civil servants to high standards, and it's actually quite reminiscent of the Dominic Cummings era when he was chief advisor, holding civil servants to high standards. But, there have been kind of several complaints over several years. The FDA, trade union, have kind of highlighted this. And I would encourage an investigation, because if there has been a complaint, you've got to go through the due process. And I'm sure that Secretary Raab would agree with that. But, he is the Deputy Prime Minister, he is the Justice Secretary. I wouldn't imagine that a man who has got this far in politics would have done so by playing dirtily with civil servants.
Of course, there have been calls for him to be suspended by the Prime Minister, but of course he wants to see this inquiry through, doesn't he, before he makes any rash decision?
Well, absolutely, because, you think back to the early 2000s, Peter Mandelson was fired before inquiry, and then he was cleared, and he never really made it back until another administration. But, yeah, I think Rishi Sunak has done the right thing by saying, we'll wait, we'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, I'm reeling in shock from some of the allegations. Dominic Raab was guilty of long silences.
Oh. He threw a tomato at one stage, apparently.
Some of it's quite risible, but the interesting thing is, first of all, if you're in under pressure situation, and in media, I've seen it, you're the presenter. No, not talking about present company, and you're under pressure and it's egg on your face. There are all the stories about Susanna Reid on a rival station this week. You're going to kick off if people aren't feeding you the right stuff at the right time. If he's got to go and stand in the House of Commons in 15 minutes and he hasn't been given the facts to have at his fingertips, somebody might be a little assertive about that. So I think we have to wait for the inquiry to find out exactly what his behaviour patterns were like. But I would also like to share that I sat on the train yesterday coming to London with a woman and she was talking about her son trying to buy a house. And I said, what's he do for a living? He works in the Home Office. He's a civil servant, quite junior. She said he absolutely hates it because she said he just feels he can't speak his mind. There's a whole mindset of what she described as left-wing indoctrination.
Right.
People don't feel they can have free speech. There's all sorts of training courses and woke stuff going on, and how to spot communism was something they had a talk on. But she said it's just... she feels there's a culture which her son can't abide, and he's not very political, that's sort of against the elected politicians.
Mind you, is that a surprise? I mean, I don't know, did you ever watch Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister? I
think that was a bit before my time.
A little bit before your time. But again, it was always politicians versus the civil service, wasn't it?
Well, that's always kind of the narrative that's been put forward for decades and decades. I don't know how true that is, but I think it's quite interesting that you say it's left-wing indoctrination, but they're being trained how to spot communism. It seems a bit oxymoronic, if you ask me.
Well, even...
oxymoronic.
Yeah.
Hey,
too early for a word like
that. He's a bright one, this one.
Can I just add finally that I think Dominic Raab is just the latest. I think there are people who are very disgruntled that their political careers may not have worked out, that Brexit won in the referendum, that the Conservatives have been in power for 12 years. And I've said it before, as opposed to going through a democratic process to unseat them and to replace them with a Labour government, there's a campaign via the media to pick them off one by one, and some of them have been hopeless and deserve to go. But the main figure was Boris Johnson. They unseated a Prime Minister, and there are people who work behind...
He unseated himself. He lied consistently to both Parliament and the public.
Right. OK, well, the public voted him out.
He violated his own rules. He's got only himself to blame. You're saying that the Labour Party are trying to somehow replace the Tories. We're doing that at the ballot box. I mean, West Lancashire, we just decimated the Conservatives.
So you represent the Labour Party?
I'm a member of the Labour Party.
Right, OK.
But yeah, the Labour Party are decimating the Conservative Party and all other opposition at every single chance they get. We don't need to try and adopt some kind of media narrative. We're doing it at the ballot box, and I look forward to these May local elections just to get that as a kind of dress rehearsal for the next general election?
Well, I don't think it's entirely just due to the Conservative Party's performance. There is a media campaign to unseat Conservative figures, and it's evident, it's there.
I just don't see it. I just don't at all.
Isn't it always? I sort of think, isn't it always the way that this? I mean, you know, if you live long enough, you know, there's always a whoever's been, especially when the government's been in for a long time.
Yeah, well, it happened to Margaret Thatcher at her own party.
Suddenly the sleaze sort of kicks in, or the allegations of sleaze. They all focus on one party and not the other, and and it is undermining, but it's just part of how we do things in this country.
Well, yeah, I mean, they unseated Margaret Thatcher, the Labour Party unseated Tony Blair. That worked out well, didn't it, for Gordon Brown? The public don't like to see people crowned. They want to see them elected. But I do think there's been a consistent campaign. And, you know, I've got my suspicions who are behind the scenes of all this, but I'm not going to say it for legal reasons.
No, please don't.
Well, the media are doing their job. They're holding the government to account. They're holding the elected members to account. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I mean, if it was a Labour government, I'd expect the very same.
Well, let them be held to account in the case of Dominic Raab when the inquiry, the independent analysis, has come to fruition. Because in this country, you are innocent until proved guilty. I don't know the man. I don't know if I'd like him or not.
No.
But I'm just saying, as trying to be objective, let's go through due process rather than let somebody, the mob, you know, get him in the stocks via certain newspapers.
Well, let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Can we just have a look? I know, Liz, you said, neither of you got a lot to say on this one, but nevertheless, I think it's important to mark. It's on the front of The Guardian this morning. Church of England priests will be allowed to bless the marriages of same-sex couples. This is really important, actually, if you're a Christian couple, isn't it, that you've got access to that?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I didn't say I don't want to talk about this because I'm not interested, or I don't want to talk about this because it's not important. I just think, yeah, well, what's not to like is my response. And as it's, you know, enshrined in UK law now, and the church, unless you're an anti-disestablishmentarianist...
Oh, show off. Don't you start as well on that side.
Then the church, you know, who has the privilege of having bishops in the House of Lords, should be toeing the line and going along with the will of the people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not a member of the Church of England. I'm not a practising Christian, but I think it's they do need to evolve. I mean, the popes evolve. The various popes over the last couple of years, well, couple of decades, have evolved their positions on things like birth control, things like homosexuality, and I imagine that Catholicism will follow that trend, and I think the Church of England are evolving to survive, and it's very welcome.
Well, I don't know if us Catholics are a bit backward.
Well, you know. Well, that's for you to say. Lovely. Thank you, Liz, Andy. If you've got a thought on that, I just think I don't think any vicar's going to be forced to do it if they don't want to, but to make it available to those who want it, I think is sensible, isn't it? But let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Right, let's bring you up to date with what's going on today. Rescue efforts continued overnight in southern Turkey and northern Syria after Monday's earthquakes, which killed more than 21,000 people. The World Health Organization is warning of more deaths to come. Many of the victims have been left without shelter from current freezing conditions.
Labour have held the West Lancashire seat after Ashley Dalton was voted in as the country's newest MP. She secured 8,000 more votes than her Conservative counterpart for the region. 10.5% swing to Labour.
Ambulance workers across England are walking out today in the latest wave of industrial action to sweep the country. Unison workers across 5 services are striking over pay. That's as university staff also walk off the job for the second day this week, with more than 70,000 staff at 150 universities taking action over jobs, pay and working conditions.
Now, let's have a look at people with some sort of learning difficulties, isn't it? Because earlier this week, Scotland's first complex needs college opened in Renfrewshire, meaning young Scots with severe learning difficulties between the ages of 18 and 25 are able to continue their learning studies into higher education.
Corsford College was officially opened by Scottish Minister for Higher and Further Education, Jamie Hepburn. Our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, went along to the opening.
After a long wait, Scotland finally has its first college facilitating students with complex needs here in Johnson, Renfrewshire. Corsford College is a further education school from Capability Scotland, where students with severe learning disabilities between the ages of 18 and 25 can continue their journey through science, the arts, numeracy and literacy. Corsford Student Support Manager Leanne Coyle explains the significance of a dedicated college for parents faced with an absence of alternatives.
There's not a meaningful further education service out there other than us at this moment in time. All those skills that they've started to develop all kind of filters away because there's then nobody giving them that next push for the next part of their life. So part of what we're trying to do here is to keep building on those skills so that in 3 to 4 years' time when they leave us, they've got a better understanding of the world around them.
Scottish Minister for Higher Education Jamie Hepburn was on site to commemorate the official opening ceremony with a plaque unveiling. He acknowledges that there has been a significant gap in Scotland's education system and was impressed by the notion of a college to fill it.
Candidly, we're not getting transitions right for every young disabled person, and that includes in their educational experience. So the notion, the idea that a college, a specific dedicated Corsford College be established was one that I found compelling. I was delighted to be able to work with colleagues to identify some specific government funding to help get that up and running off the ground.
Corsford student Darren was one of 3 students who spoke at the unveiling. He could barely contain his happiness at the very notion of being at college.
You're so happy. You're my friend. It's to say, I love you.
Corsford College currently supports 16 young adults with plans to expand its student body in the near future. These parents needn't worry about what happens with their children after secondary school, but significant work lies ahead to fund similar colleges across Scotland in order to offer higher education to college-age complex needs students across the country. Tony Maguire, GB News, Johnston.
Now, you see, I think that's really important. I think it's just, and I think it's a wonderful thing that people who've got learning difficulties, who are, and of that age, a slightly older age than sort of your general sort of school children, are getting that opportunity to learn more, to develop skills, social interaction, communication, all these things, because it helps them then contribute to society, like the rest of us do, because it's important to contribute.
And often they're left out of education, aren't they? So hugely important. Hugely.
Yeah, I just think the idea that they can then contribute to society in any way, which is not necessarily financial. It's not as though, you know, support and financial support and all the rest of it isn't going to be needed, because it will be. But it's just a fact for their own well-being as much as anything else, playing an active role in society, and I think that goes for anyone with a disability. I have a friend who's sort of badly disabled, if you like, cerebral palsy in all 4 limbs, who years ago would have been left behind. You know, he has communication issues and all the rest of it, and needs to be looked after all the time. He is one of the brightest young men. He's 23, I think. He is so bright and so sharp and so across politics in particular. And he's contributing in loads of ways in these committees and groups working on disability issues. He's always involved in stuff, and he's one of the brightest people I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. And the fact he's disabled is irrelevant, isn't it?
It's about giving the opportunity, isn't it? Having money, giving the opportunity.
Exactly. Wouldn't we all want the same thing? And I just think it's time to stop shutting people in rooms and not having them part of society. I think part of it is also, though, how we, as the rest of the public, respond to people with a disability. And I think we're getting better, but I think there is with some people, of course, there is still a bit of an embarrassment. Oh, how do you talk to people, or how do you? Does he take sugar? All that, you know, all that sort of stuff. And we've got to learn, haven't we, as able-bodied people? And
absolutely. I mean, my son has a serious food allergy, and that can sometimes feel like a disability. You go into a restaurant, people don't know what to say, so take that one step further. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we have to be a bit more open, perhaps.
Yeah, be open and encouraging and supportive, and and realise that we're all just people at the end of the day. Disability or not, we're all just people, and we all deserve a chance. I think that's really, really important. If you've got a view on that, or indeed you're a disabled person, or someone in a family with a disabled person, or a carer or whatever, gbviews@gbnews.uk. My friend Kira, actually, she's got a learning disability. She works for MENCAP, and she's been on the show, actually. And again, she's the most incredible advocate. And she's been given an opportunity, and she's, I don't know how old she is now, in her 30s, I think, but, you know, and she's married and she's working, and her husband's got a learning disability, and they're both working away and both contributing and being really positive members of society. Why wouldn't you want that?
Yeah. It's about educating other people, though, isn't it, to know how we can bring out the best of people with learning needs. Of course they can contribute. Of course, as you say, your friend, hugely intelligent. We just need to understand that, to be able to help these people succeed
and get past,
and be happy.
And not be scared of communication difficulties. My friend Luke, when we Zoom a lot, we go up and see him, but predominantly we talk over Zoom or whatever. And you know, he's on camera, and his mum is off. She normally stays off camera, but if I can't quite catch what he's saying, she sort of translates, if you like, and so you can actually just have a proper conversation. We're on for at least an hour. Every time.
If you're patient,
talks my head off. Talks my head off. But I come away a lot more educated in what's going on politically than I knew before.
That's brilliant. Fantastic.
Stephen in Dundee, morning to you, sir. My friend, he says, with the biggest of Brummie accents, got married in Scotland and wore a kilt. So I'm getting the distinct impression that it will be all right for me to wear a kilt.
I think you've got the green light now.
I've got the green light. So
and we want to know whether you go for it.
It's just the tartan. Bob the Scot said, have a look at the Ramsey tartan.
Ramsey tartan, there you go.
If you've got any tartan ideas, let me know. Got your top stories coming up after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's yet another cold start in the south, with temperatures below freezing in many places, cloudier and milder elsewhere. And then for the vast majority, we're going to see that cloud spread across the UK through the day. At the moment, high pressure sits to the south of the UK. That's led to light winds and clear spells overnight in the south. But further north, a blustery wind coming from the southwest has brought a lot of cloud cover and some persistent rain over western hills of England, Wales, and more especially northern and western Scotland. Some heavier rain for a time for the Highlands. However, heading into the afternoon, whilst cloud spills southeastwards, the rain in the north will tend to ease. It will become more confined to western hills. Some breaks emerging in the northeast of Scotland, and towards the southeast we keep some brighter spells as well, where we get some brightness, 11, 12 Celsius possible, and fairly widely 9, 10, 11 degrees. So above average for the time of year, relatively mild, although with a lot of cloud cover and a keen breeze. That breeze will be gusty over the hills of northern England and Scotland. I don't think it will feel especially pleasant. During the night time on Friday night, we'll see a few clear spells across southern areas. Again, that will lead to a touch of frost in places, but less widespread compared with recent mornings. More widespread will be low cloud and some hill fog, especially for Wales and the southwest. And we'll continue to see a lot of cloud for Scotland, that cloud covering the hills of western Scotland and giving a few spots of rain and drizzle. 1 or 2 spots of rain and drizzle further south, predominantly over, say, the Welsh mountains and around coastal areas. But actually the trend into the afternoon on Saturday is for some sunshine to emerge across South Wales and the southwest. 12 or 13 Celsius where this happens, and northeast Scotland will see some brighter weather, 12 or 13 again. And so for the vast majority, actually, Saturday will be cloudy but relatively mild. We'll see some breaks in the cloud later. Sunday starts off with a few fog patches, particularly again towards the southwest, but another mostly dry day is expected.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The death toll in Syria and Turkey has now passed 21,000.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. It's Friday, the 10th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Tamsin. These are your top stories today.
The humanitarian crisis following the earthquake that rocked both Turkey and Syria is continuing as hundreds of thousands of people are now homeless, with the Red Cross warning of freezing temperatures and water shortages in the coming days.
Labour's Ashley Dalton has won the West Lancashire by-election after securing a majority of more than 8,000. But is this an early indicator of how a future general election could look?
We'll bring you the results of our GB News People's Poll to show if the rest of the country feels the same way. And we'll bring you something completely different. John Cleese has given GB News an exclusive interview about his upcoming show and the unbelievable return of Fawlty Towers. We have all the reaction later.
I can't imagine what it's going to be like brought back. Will it work? I don't know.
Who knows?
Well, look, if you want to join in any of our discussions, we'd love to hear from you this morning. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, the devastating earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria earlier this week is on course to become one of the deadliest in a decade.
The death toll has now risen to more than 21,000 following the catastrophic quake that had a magnitude of 7.8.
However, fears are now turning to the freezing temperatures as countless survivors face homelessness, with the UK sending thousands of thermal blankets overnight.
Well, let's head to Istanbul. We can talk to the editor of TRT World, Yusuf Erim. Yusuf, good to see you this morning. I mean, what's the latest you can tell us about the situation?
Well, the latest is that the situation is still dire. International rescue crews, local rescue crews, they're working around the clock. There's been a lot of people pulled out of the rubble despite it being the fourth day. So we're seeing how resilient the human body is, being able to withstand those sub-zero temperatures at night, dehydration, trauma wounds, and whatnot. And rescue crews will continue probably working for the next 2 to 3 days. But it looks like the death toll most likely is going to rise much more dramatically now in these coming days as they're working deeper and deeper into the rubble. Most of the bodies that they reach, unfortunately, are lifeless. So I expect that death toll, unfortunately, to eclipse 50,000. But the biggest problem right now is the homeless people. There's over 1 million people that are homeless right now. Either their buildings have collapsed or received significant structural damage and they can't go back. So that's the biggest challenge right now facing the Turkish government.
And what are the survivors doing, Yusuf, now? They're homeless, as you say. Where are they going? Are there tents set up? We know aid's on the way, but what are they doing right now? Is there anywhere they can go?
Well, there's actually many short-term solutions that the government's trying to provide. There are some tent cities that are set up. There are container homes that are being set up. Some of them are being shipped to hotels in Antalya, Alanya, Mersin. Others are being shipped to nearby municipalities that have housing and state housing dormitories. So everyone's trying to do their part in being able to get these survivors through this short-term period until the Turkish government has time to begin orchestrating and building a rebuilding policy. And that's something that's more medium to long-term. The focus right now is on these short-term needs. And that's divided into two, one being rescue and the other being relief, which is based on, as I said, the short-term sheltering, providing them food, finance, and clothing.
It's so difficult to get your head around from the distance of being over here, Yusuf. With it's more than 21,000 dead now, and you saying you would expect that to go up to 50,000, but millions of people really must be displaced and struggling without electricity, without water, without decent food supplies and medical supplies. I mean, this has the potential, doesn't it, to turn into an absolutely major humanitarian crisis?
Definitely, it definitely has that potential. You know, both of us, members of the media, I'm sure we've all covered many earthquakes, and an earthquake is devastating in its own right. But this is something I've never seen, and living in Turkey, a country that is earthquake prone, we've had many experiences with earthquakes, but this is unprecedented. It's impacted an area the size of Bulgaria. So 13.5 million people impacted, not just one city, multiple cities in ruins. You have multiple cities with populations near 2 million in ruins. You have Adana, Diyarbakir, Gaziantep, Hatay. These are populated cities that are laying in ruins. I mean, you have a city like Hatay, a very beautiful, old, ancient city, about 80–90% of it just destroyed right now. And it's going to be a huge rebuilding project. It's going to be probably the biggest construction project in human history. And you're basically rebuilding a region of your country going forward. So yes, this is not a normal earthquake. This is the disaster of the century, and the numbers, when they're finally tallied up, are going to directly suggest that. And when I say 50,000, I think that's modest.
Yusuf, just tell us a little bit about the situation in Syria. Very difficult to get aid through there with only one pathway open. Tell us a bit more about what's going on now and if more aid has reached the country.
The situation in Syria is equally bad, if not worse. At least the Turks have the institutions and the rescue teams and the equipment to be able to help themselves to a certain point. And of course, through their network of allies, they're receiving a lot of international support, whether it be the Greeks, the Israelis, the Azerbaijanis, the Brits, the EU, the Indians. Everyone's sending support, but the situation is not like that in Syria. It's a lot tougher over there. The country was already war-torn. The structures were already damaged. They're very old. They're not upkept. So these earthquakes really devastated the region. And at times, we can't get a clear picture of what's going on just because there's widespread devastation over there. as you said, the border crossings, they're very, very tricky to get through. The UN Security Council needs to approve certain border crossings to be able to pass. You have China and Russia at times vetoing the use of these border crossings, making it very, very difficult. And the situation gets dire. You also have the regime, which is trying to monopolize that aid. Are they going to use it for the right reasons? That's a question mark. You don't know when that money goes to the regime. So the areas in the north truly devastated. Normally, the Turks would have been the first ones to help the people of northern Syria, but unfortunately, right now the Turks need everything they have for themselves. They're trying to help themselves, and even Turkey needs help, and they need the international support. So it's truly a huge disaster of epic proportions, unimaginable. What's happening in northern Syria as well.
Yusuf Erim, we really appreciate you talking to us and getting us up to date. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope the British people continue their support. We really appreciate it. It's not going unnoticed. I wanted to say that.
Thank you so much.
Let's bring you some breaking news this morning, and the UK is not in recession. That's according to the latest data from the Office for National Statistics. Now, it shows that although the UK's economy didn't grow in the final quarter of last year, it actually narrowly avoided falling into recession. December's GDP was down by 0.5%, but overall, the annual GDP rate has grown by 4.1% last year, and that goes against essentially all the predictions. You remember the Bank of England telling us we were going to fall into a really long recession. And then people are saying, well, it's going to be long, but it's going to be shallow. But we're not in recession yet. We might be teetering on the edge, but it hasn't happened yet. The crucial thing, as Liam Halligan always tells us, is you've got to look under the bonnet with these sort of things and see what those figures really mean. So we'll be getting further analysis a little bit later on.
Now we can bring you the latest results of the GB News People's Poll. The Conservative vote remains at a flat 21% this week, leaving Labour with half of the national vote, according to the poll.
This comes just after the West Lancashire by-election, of course, which saw Labour's Ashley Dalton voted in as the new MP. She got 8,000 more votes than her Conservative counterpart for the region.
So how can the Conservatives expect to come back from this historic defeat? Here to talk to us is politics professor and academic Matt Goodwin. Good to see you, Matt. So just tell us, how can they come back?
It's going to be very, very difficult in the poll numbers this week. We've got the Conservatives, as you say, all the way down on 21% of the vote. This is a historic low coming just before those spring local elections. Don't forget, we've seen a by-election defeat for the Conservatives overnight, but we've got those local elections in the spring. And I'm telling you, if I was in Rishi Sunak's team looking at these numbers, I'd be pretty worried, because you're looking at something equivalent to a sort of 1997 style wipeout unless things begin to change. So these numbers are pretty bleak for the Conservatives.
Looking at other figures, we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, Matt. Let's look at what else you've been asking as well. This is a top one. I mean, in some respects, it doesn't surprise me. In other respects, it does a little. Boris Johnson, the most popular Prime Minister since the 2019 election. Are you surprised or not?
Do you know what? I'm not surprised, really. We've had 3 prime ministers, haven't we? We've gone through Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, now Rishi Sunak. We said to all voters, which one of those is your favourite? Boris comes top. Interestingly, among 2019 Conservative voters, those voters Rishi Sunak needs to win back, it's not even close. Over half of Conservative voters say Boris is their first choice. About 18%, 1/8, say Rishi Sunak. So look, whatever you think about Boris Johnson, whether you love him, whether you loathe him, he still has a significant amount of star power in British politics. He still does connect with a certain section of the electorate. And I suspect that if the Conservatives have a very difficult set of local elections in the spring, all this talk about a sort of, looming challenge to Rishi Sunak in the background. We saw Liz Truss last week. We've seen Boris Johnson on manoeuvres. I suspect that is going to escalate over the summer, and we'll be having a renewed debate about potentially the return of some of these big beasts within the Conservatives.
You may as well just press the self... I mean, if they're going to do that, if they're going to look at changing at the top again, they may as well just press the self-destruct button, mightn't they?
Well, look, I mean, the other thing we find, this is how bad things are, actually, I think, for the Conservatives. We said to voters this week, which party do you think is best able to manage Brexit? Right now, this is a Conservative Party issue. Conservative Party have basically claimed Brexit. They sort of own Brexit. You would expect the Conservatives to at least be ahead on that issue. But this week we find Labour are 1 point ahead of the Conservatives, even on Brexit. So whether we look at the economy, whether we look at National Health Service, whether we look at inflation, cost of living, and now also Brexit, also, by the way, immigration, this is a massive problem for the Conservatives because they have to own some issues. They have to be able to say, those are our issues, and we're going to hold that line until the next election. But actually, even on Brexit, we find they're falling behind. And this rings very, very loud alarm bells to me. It just shows that the party doesn't seem to be connecting with people, doesn't seem to be giving people a clear sense of purpose. And that's really a big problem going into these local elections and potentially that big 24 general election.
I wonder what you make of this, Matt. Steve in Cleethorpes has been in touch. Morning, Steve. He says, as one of the grey voters who always votes and supports the Tory party, even I fully expect Labour to win the next election, and to be fair, my party does not deserve to. Now, if that is a sentiment which is being reflected, then that's actually a major issue, isn't it, for the government?
I think Steve is reflecting a broader view. Look, I spend a lot of my time in focus groups speaking to voters like Steve, and I think among many voters, especially in places of the country like the Red Wall, I think they just feel let down. I think they gave the Conservatives this unique historic moment to do something to the country, to deliver Brexit, to change immigration, to level up those regions, to represent voters like Steve. And I think a lot of those voters feel that the party really squandered that opportunity. And the million-dollar question now is whether people like Steve are going to stay at home and not vote at all, or whether they're going to switch over to the Labour Party. Because if you look at Boris Johnson's voters in 2019, about a fifth of those voters have gone to Labour, but about a third are now saying they're not going to vote for anybody. Now, Sunak's going to be praying those people break for the Conservatives. But if they break for Labour, I mean, things could even get worse for the Conservatives. So there's a lot of people out there frustrated, disillusioned, talking about these big, huge issues, the cost of living crisis, inflation, energy, and they don't feel, for different reasons, that the Conservative government is on top of those issues. And that's why we're seeing the numbers we're seeing. It's why we're seeing the by-election defeats like last night, and it's why we're almost certainly going to see a bruising night for the Conservatives at those local elections in the spring.
Good to talk to you. Thank you. Journalist and author Julie Cook is in the studio. Let's just reflect on that, Julie, should we? They're not connecting. The government isn't connecting, not even with their core voters now.
Exactly. And as our guest there just said, their own issues that they should be owning, such as Brexit and things like that, they can't hang on to. So I think that's quite telling of how disastrous things are at the moment for them.
It's got to set alarm bells ringing, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think if your core voters of Conservative are saying, I'd rather vote Labour, I'd rather not vote at all, these are serious problems for Rishi Sunak. I don't know how they're going to come back from it, really. I don't know. As you say, self-destruct button almost. Maybe it needs that. Maybe it needs a complete start again, because at the moment it's like a slow death.
But what about, you see, I'm fascinated. Steve in Cleethorpes, you've really piqued my interest, Steve, this morning. He's an older voter, he's a Tory voter, but he says, I expect Labour to win.
Yeah, and I think that's very telling, but particularly because a lot of voters who did always vote Labour voted Conservative in the last election because of Brexit or whatever, those Red Wall voters, I think they feel a bit betrayed, and I think a lot of them are going to think, well, Labour are going to get in anyway, I might as well vote for them or not at all. And as you say, people who've always voted Conservative feel betrayed, let down. So I think, as you say, what Steve says is pretty accurate of most of the electorate, really.
And the by-election last night, a comfortable win.
Comfortable, yeah, very comfortable, if not semi-landslide. I mean, it was very, very comfortable win. And I think, as we said, it could be indicative of the May local elections. It could even be indicative of the general election.
Interesting, though, because 10.5% swing to Labour. It's a swing that's important, but turnout only 32% or thereabouts. Is that just a case of, well, Tory voters just thinking, well, what's the point?
I think in that particular by-election, possibly, because it had been a Labour stronghold for 17 years, it was Labour through and through, possibly they thought, well, what does my vote count? It could be an element of that. But as you say, it does still show that Labour has a lot of sway, there's a lot of interest in Labour, and I think they're looking in the polls the best bet at the moment.
Julie, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. OK, let's bring you up to date with some of the other headlines at 17 minutes past 7. And as we were just saying, Labour have held the West Lancashire seat after Ashley Dalton was voted in as the country's newest MP, securing 8,000 more votes than the Conservatives.
Lancashire police say their search for missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, has moved towards the sea. The force says it's now searching further downstream where the River Wyre becomes tidal. The 45-year-old was last seen 14 days ago walking her dog.
Meningitis cases across England have more than doubled in a year. The charity Meningitis Now says 205 instances were recorded in 2022, 125 cases more than the previous year. Now, amidst the cost of living crisis, we're keeping tabs on how prices and economy are doing. We can tell you now, as we did a moment ago, that the GDP figures in the last few minutes show that the economy fell by 0.5% in December.
But the figures have remained relatively stable over the final quarter of the year and have even grown by 4.1% across the whole of 2022.
Well, let's talk to the CEO and founder of Fair Finance and Fair Money, Dr. Roger Giewolb, who joins us in the studio. Good to see you. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Stephen. Very well. Thank you.
What do you make of these figures? The fact we're not in recession.
Yeah, I mean, they're surprisingly good. I expected them to announce a small further negative drop, but they've really recovered. Not only are we not in recession, but I suppose that we've also pulled out of that last position we were in last week.
Still pretty gloomy, though.
Very gloomy.
Yeah, I mean, but the fact we are sort of flat in essence, and the Chancellor has said in the last few minutes, the UK was the fastest growing economy in the G7 last year. We have avoided recession, shows our economy is more resilient than many feared. You think he's right? Well,
yeah, I think he's right insofar as what economists think, but these numbers never really do affect the daily lives of most Britons. The crush of the cost of living crisis, the crush of interest rates and energy prices is still with us. And in fact, I noted that even though inflation is due to be 3.2% next winter, it's still going to be very, very difficult for people.
So when are we really going to see an upturn in the economy? When can people say, finally, I can feel a difference?
I would think about 2 years.
Right. OK.
Just before a general election. And,
well, that's handy.
Well, my theory is that all the taxation that's going on and the increased interest rates are really to build up a war chest of funds to give us some giant tax cuts just before the general election, because, the Tories are sort of hanging on with their fingernails at the moment, and they're hoping that that will turn things around. I'm not so sure.
That's interesting, because, people have speculated about that, of course. I know you look at the finance and not the necessarily the sort of the political and social political side of it all, but do you think the public would buy into that? Because ultimately we would know, wouldn't we, that we had struggled for 2 years when perhaps we wouldn't have had to have struggled so badly if they weren't doing it for political reasons.
Please don't get me started.
Oh, no,
I do look at the political and the social. We are being gaslighted. In other words, that's a term a lot of people use without really understanding what it means. It means manipulating someone so that they doubt their own reality, what's in front of their nose. We are being gaslighted by this government and the opposition like never before. We're being told that raising interest rates is good for us and helping combat inflation. Well, I looked at a program I did last June, and I said, oh my God, it's our 5th interest rate rise. We've gone to 1.25%. Inflation is 10%. Well, Andrew Bailey's not much of a firefighter because it's still 10%. We're on our 10th rise, and now we're probably heading to 4.5%. I don't think the public is fooled by being told this is good for them. I also don't think they're fooled by the taxes, you know, all the stealth taxes recently introduced. I think the Tories are going to have a really hard time, even if they dole out giant tax cuts. And Labour, frankly, is no better. The human bollard, as Boris called Starmer the other day, really should be out there every day saying what they would do, but instead he just criticizes.
Oh, that's really interesting, because what we're told is, of course, that the tax rate, well, they're told the Bank of England is putting tax up because that helps deal with inflation. We're told that inflation is the big problem, and Rishi Sunak is working to bring it down by 50% by the end of the year. I mean, do those things not go hand in hand?
No, I'm sorry, I don't want to be cruel to anybody, but it's utter nonsense. What we have is called cost-push inflation. That's non-consumer demand-driven inflation. When you raise interest rates, it's to damp down demand-pull inflation, where we're all spending too much money. You've needed to buy 3 suits this month, and you've gone on 4 holidays so far this year. People are spending too much. That's not happening. We're not spending. We're cutting back. We have millions of people who, literally, I talk to them as a consumer champion, between heat and eat.
Yeah. So
raising interest rates does nothing except cripple them further. And as I just said, it hasn't done a thing to reduce inflation. Cost-push inflation burns itself out, just like it did in 2009, when for 3 years the Bank of England didn't raise interest rates and it burned out. That's what's happening now. That's why energy prices are falling. Everything else, inflation is falling. It will be 3%, 3.2 by next winter, but it's got nothing to do with either a set of politicians.
Oh,
interesting.
It is interesting. Roger Gewolb, we want to talk to you again. We're going to have to get you back to discuss this more.
Thank you so much.
Really good to see you.
Thank you.
Now, isn't that interesting? That is very interesting. I do want to discuss that further. We've got Tulip Sadiq on later, and we'll see what she has to say about that, actually. But when we come back, Aidan McGee's here. Got all the latest sports headlines, including the potential return of the European Super League.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already depressed.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:28, good morning to you. Watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Tamsin. This is what we've got coming up for you today.
At 7:50, we'll be paying tribute to music icon Burt Bacharach after he sadly passed away at the age of 94. As one of the biggest songwriters in history, he wrote and composed over 500 tracks and worked with stars including Cilla Black and Tom Jones.
Then, with Border Force staff warning of disruption ahead of their strike action, we're going to be joined by travel guru Simon Calder at 8:25 to see how families can escape for the half-term without getting caught up in travel chaos. OK, time for the sport this morning. Aidan McGee is here. Morning to you.
Morning to you both. Good to see you.
Yeah, all right. Let's start off with something which is going to put a shiver down a lot of football fans' spines. Should we? A European Super League.
Yeah, it's rearing its head again, Stephen. I mean, I was right in the thick of it back in April 2021 when it first came forward. Now, I should have had a bit of context here. It had been in the offing for something like 30 years. The big clubs in the various leagues around Europe, and which includes obviously the Premier League, have been saying, we're commercially powerful, we could go alone, we don't need you lot, we can just play our own game against each other, we can take the ball and go and shift it somewhere else and make loads of money. The problem with that was that, I mean, I'll give you an example. I was at Stamford Bridge that night. Chelsea were playing Brighton, and fans weren't even allowed in the game. They weren't due to turn up for any other reason than to protest. And I was told, oh, there'll be a small protest at Chelsea. I could not believe what unfolded. You can see the pictures there. I mean, Chelsea, on the face of it, one of the clubs who may benefit from this most, but they were just absolutely aghast at their then owner, Roman Abramovich, his willingness to comply with all these other clubs who wanted to go off and make money. And one of the standout placards was, "We want our Tuesday nights in Stoke." And Stoke haven't played Chelsea for a few years, but they didn't just want to play in European competition. They wanted the domestic earthiness of domestic competition. So now, look, they backed down. The English clubs pulled out within 48 hours. I've never known a capitulation like it, because this has been thought through. The problem back then was the PR. So it came from an email from the Real Madrid president, Florentino Perez. It was amateur stuff. It really was. It wasn't backed by anything. It almost seemed like a joke at first. So the PR was the problem. So now they've appointed this company called A22. When I think of A22, I think of a really horrible road between London and Eastbourne. Yeah. But this company has been formed in Madrid, so you can guess that it's been backed by Real Madrid. It's been backed by Barcelona and Juventus. They're the clubs who really want to see us as European Super League, because they don't get the carve up of TV money that we get in the Premier League. They're a little bit jealous of what we do here and how we've arranged our league. Yes, it's not perfect. There are faults of it, but the bottom line is that the clubs who are of equivalent size to Liverpool, Man United, Chelsea, whatever, they're not getting the same amount of money in those other leagues. So this company, A22, have produced this new format yesterday. 80 teams. That's the key thing. It was just going to be a group of about 16, I think it was, teams initially. There was going to be no relegation, no promotion. So that means it's a closed shop. No one can come into it. No one can come out of it. They're on their own. That comes from the fact that a lot of these clubs are owned by Americans. They're not used to they're not used to promotion and relegation. I think if you're part of this major franchise where you can earn all this money, why would you want to drop out of it and suffer that drop in income? So they've said that there'll be promotion and relegation. They've said that there will be no permanent members, so you can slip in and slip out of it, and there'll be open competition. So that is the sweetener. They'll say that all the money all the extra money they'll generate.
Would that work, though? Because if you got relegated...
Yeah.
I don't know.
But they say there's going to be 4 divisions.
But if Manchester City... Well, yeah, so...
See, if there's 4 divisions and you get relegated from the top one, and that's where the top clubs are going to be, you only go down to the one just below. So there will still be a financial sweetener. You're not going to suffer the 80% drop in income that you suffer when you go from the Premier League to, say, the Championship. I mean, there's a famous example...
All right, just briefly, because we're out of time.
Cool.
Will fans buy this?
Oh, absolutely not. No, it's been talked... Kevin Miles from the Football Supporters Association has already called it a walking corpse. I have to say, I couldn't agree more.
Right. Lovely. Aidan, thanks. Sorry we're a bit tight this morning, but...
I'm a bit tight sometimes.
There you are, yes, yeah. Short arms and long pockets, Aidan. Okay, there you go. Thanks, Aidan. If you've got a thought on that, if you're a big football fan, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Right, more to come, including the biggest stories from today's papers, alongside Liz Kershaw and Andy McDonald.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is 7:36. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Tamsin.
Right, let's
I said
take
that a bit
look.
funny, didn't I?
I thought that was a
Stephen
great
and
intro.
Tamsin.
Thank you. A big up intro. Let's take a look at today's front pages now. The Times reports that Ukraine is prepared to use British long-range missiles to hit targets in Crimea, the peninsula annexed by Russia in 2014.
The Telegraph looks at the Deputy PM, Dominic Raab, defending his management style following allegations of bullying.
The Mirror leads with money-saving expert Martin Lewis, who says plans to raise the cap on energy bills would be a national act of harm.
And The Sun is saying that the search for Nicola Bulley, who disappeared, and police saying they think she went into the River Wyre in St Michael's. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of that, though, but they're now taking their search out to the sea.
The Daily Star says the comic legend with Chuckle in his name has unveiled a plan to get people laughing again.
Oh, well, that'd be quite nice. That would be quite... We need it all. It's all a bit grim at the moment, isn't it? Let's go through the papers then with Assistant Editor of the London Financial, Andy McDonald, and broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Good morning, you two.
Morning. Hiya.
Let's have a look at the Mail Online, Andy, looking at the by-election, Lancashire West.
Well, yeah, we've had the West Lancashire by-election. It's been a Labour hold. The Labour Party have increased their majority by 10%. Ashley Dalton elected as, the newest Member of Parliament. The Conservatives down 10%, though. Mike Prendergast, with only about 5,000 votes. It's not exactly a shining kind of result.
Turnout was terrible, though. I mean, you get the impression Tory voters have just gone, what's the point? It's a Labour stronghold, I'm just not going to bother.
Well, also, Labour voters haven't turned out, either. The Labour kind of voters decreased more than the Tory vote, proportionally speaking. I mean, what's most interesting, we saw Reform UK take a surge in the national polls. They didn't even make their deposit back on this one.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting to see how that'll play out, because I know it is in the northwest, and the northwest is a pretty strong Labour kind of area. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the upcoming local elections at the beginning of May. But yeah, a big win for the Labour Party, and I'm sure that Keir Starmer and the rest of the leadership will feel encouraged by this result.
I mean, look, in a way, it's the figures here are insignificant, Liz. It's the swing, which is 10.5%. It's a big swing.
Percentages. But the thing about that constituency is it's very, very diverse socioeconomically. You've got very rural areas, farmers, landowners, like Ormskirk and surrounding areas and villages. And then you've got Skelmersdale, where there's a lot of poverty and deprivation. But the interesting thing to me was, on the figures, the turnout, 2019, the turnout was 72%, and 2023, it was 31%, so less than half of the people that went out to vote. Now, the Labour vote has about halved from 27,500 to 14,000, whereas the Conservative vote, which was 19,000 in 2019, as you said, has gone down to 5,700. So I think the Conservatives just thought, I can't support this lot currently and what's going on. I don't agree with their policies. I'm not going to vote for anybody else, so I'm just not going to leave the house. And I think that's why. But I think it's interesting about the Reform vote, and it brings on what I would say about polls. You can be polled and you can say, yes, I'm furious, I'm going to vote, for this protest party. But once you get into the ballot box and the booth, and you've got to put your cross on a piece of paper, and you're thinking, ooh, my wallet, ooh, my job, ooh, my farming subsidies. You really vote with your wallet. The economy's stupid.
Well, it's why, in a national vote, the polls always tighten. They always, whether they'll tighten enough for the Tories in the next couple of years, who knows? Let's have a look at the Mail, Liz, should we? And, I mean, they're sort of saying, when will the Treasury get the message over tax? What message is this?
Well, the message is that the corporation tax, in other words, what you tax businesses on the profits, is currently 19% in the UK.
Yeah.
And AstraZeneca have said, right, you're putting that up to 25% on the 1st of April this year, which I haven't met anybody who thinks that's an incentive to invest in the United Kingdom. No. The AstraZeneca have said, right, we're off to Ireland, where, guess what the corporation tax is in Ireland, and why you get so many firms like multinationals making that the European base. 12.5%.
Yeah.
And countries are allowed to compete. Holland attracts a lot of businesses because of its comparatively low corporation tax, including Ireland's biggest brand, U2.
Oh, yeah.
Who are registered in Amsterdam to avoid paying tax. So we've got to be competitive, and there's a lot of evidence at the moment that at one time there was all this international money keen to invest in the UK, and it's sort of dropped back now. And even firms like Jaguar Land Rover are thinking of transferring the building of their electric vehicles to Slovakia. That would be a major blow.
What would the Labour Party do?
What would the Labour Party do? I don't know. You'd have to ask Keir Starmer. I'm not Keir Starmer, and I'm not his mother either. So I think you'd have to ask him.
No, but you remember the Labour Party. What's their policy on?
I don't think the Labour Party have a clear policy as yet, because we're yet to declare the manifesto. But from my personal opinion, AstraZeneca are just chatting absolute rubbish on this. They had an 11% rise in profits in the third quarter of last year. That's 10.59 billion that went into shareholders' pockets. They're moving it to Ireland. It's just not sustainable. Kind of the best graduates go to London. The best graduate researchers go to Oxford and Imperial. There's no point in moving to Ireland, and we need to hold kind of big corporations who are making disgusting profits in this cost of living crisis to account.
Oh, well, yeah, but there's a lot of any business sense to say, well, you go where you're going to make more profits. If you make more profits just by moving to a different country, you're going to do it. Loads of pharmaceuticals have moved to Ireland. I know plenty of pharmaceutical companies have got bases in Ireland now because they're paying less.
I think what we should be doing is properly taxing companies that make huge profits. So because of fancy accounting and allocate, like Amazon pays hardly any corporation tax in the UK because they claim they don't make a profit in the UK. They make the profit in other countries where they operate. That's spooky. But, you've got BP. Mr. Looney runs BP. He's not that daft. He made 23 billion profits, latest figures show. Shell, $40 billion. Centrica, who own British Gas, $134 billion pounds. If we properly got a good chunk of tax out of these people, we wouldn't have to put the rates up.
Right. Well, again, let us know what you think. What should we have a look at next?
I'd say, should we move on to kind of the energy, because Liz was discussing it. Martin Lewis in the Mirror. Raising the cap on energy bills would be a national act of harm, he says. The Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, there you go, there's your Labour Party policy. Yeah. The Shadow Chancellor's backing that. And I do agree, it was Graham Hiscott who reported this, and, removing this cap will do such damage to people across the country, both fiscally and mentally. If they're struggling to pay their bills, it'll have a mental and a fiscal toll. And, major energy companies took home 110 billion to their shareholders. How can they make such excessive profits when people are struggling to pay their bills?
Yeah, because we're almost out of time. Just very briefly, and it's not as though I don't understand it. But looking at the other side, the argument is it costs us. We don't control what the energy bills are what the energy companies are charging. So the cap costs us as taxpayers. We're having to fund the difference, which the Chancellor has said at the moment is going to be unsustainable.
The industry is broken. There's no reason why energy prices should be at the level they are now, and no excuse for them to rise anymore, because last week I read that the actual price for gas on the markets is lower than it was before Putin invaded Ukraine. So we are all just being taken for a ride.
I think there's an element of that. Look, we've got to leave it there. We'll see you two a little bit later on. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Now, last night, the legendary actor and comedian John Cleese joined Dan Wootton for an exclusive interview. The former Monty Python star discussed the future of Fawlty Towers and, of course, his new show coming soon on GB News.
Well, I'm excited because I'm doing this show with you. I've been working with a couple of guys on it, and the whole idea of being able to create a show from scratch without anyone looking over our shoulders. It's a sort of trust that we had when we started Monty Python. We went in to see Michael Mills, who was the head of Light Entertainment, and he said, well, what sort of a show are you guys planning to do? What would you like to do? And we hadn't discussed it.
Well, let's talk through all the fabulous details with our very own Stephanie Tetchy. Good morning.
Good morning, Stephen and Tamsin.
Nice to see you.
Fawlty Towers back. I mean, that's what grabs us, because we know John is coming here later on in the year. Looking forward to that. But Fawlty Towers, can it really come back?
I think, you know what, the media has been slaughtering it. It hasn't had a good reception as I thought it would, but I can imagine fans are very happy because it's been 40 years since it was last on our screen. And even though it was 12 episodes, it's always been deemed as the best British sitcom of all time. But you see, in the era where it came out in the 70s, things were less PC. Comedy could be comedy. And John Cleese has been one of those people right now who's been very vocal against cancel culture. And even with the original series, like stations such as the BBC and UK TV, they've gone back and they've edited scenes which they have deemed offensive. So now, 40 years on, I don't know if they will be recreating the same magic because it's a different TV landscape, though. But more than anything, people loved his character of Basil. And that's what I think people want to see on screens again.
But it's a risk, isn't it, bringing back something that was so good?
I know.
I mean, you know,
sometimes
so popular.
People say if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it and keep it as it is, because, you know, during the past, they tried to revive it on US TV 3 times, and 3 times it failed. It just couldn't connect. It couldn't get off the ground. But John has says that the story has moved on, so it's not actually going to be set in Britain. When I was watching the interview with Lovely Dan, he kind of hinted that actually it might be set in the Caribbean. And it might be focused, most of the characters that people know and love from the show, they've all passed away, like Andrew Sachs, who played Manuel. So people are not going to be seeing their favourites. So he's kind of hinted it's going to be focused on him and his daughter, Camilla Cleese, who's been his writing partner over the past 16 years. So we're going to be seeing Basil trying to navigate the modern world. So the story will move on, and it might not be set in Britain, it might be in the Caribbean. So it
sounds
will
like
be
it'll be quite different, which is probably not a bad thing.
They've got to... who would they get to sort of replace Sybil, though?
Sybil? I have a feeling like she would have probably passed away by then. Or did she
No, she hasn't. No, she's still around now. She's still around now. I think she's in her late 80s or 90s.
I don't think they'll bring her character back for some reason. I think it'll be mostly focused on him and his daughter.
Oh.
Yeah.
So could be quite...
We're going to have to watch this space, but they haven't announced a broadcaster yet, so I think it's still a long way to go to see. I doubt it will go on the BBC, if I'm honest.
No, you won't, because it's not going to be woke, is it?
No,
I mean, it can't be.
It's
He
not
can't
gonna
do
be
it woke.
And in the interview last night, which I watched, you know, John was saying that he wouldn't want it to go back on the BBC. He snubbed it because he says that he doesn't feel like he'll have to give it the freedom it deserves to be the show it needs to be. So I'm betting on it going on a streaming service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it could be... I just think it could be quite interesting, though, because it's going to have to... You know, you've got to be careful, but it's got to be able to be...
Still
sort of a little bit offensive.
Well, that's John Cleese.
I'm sure it will be.
On and off screen, that is John Cleese. He's a lovely, offensive character. So I think most people love Basil, so I think he'll be able to bring it back to life.
Well, it's going to be scrutinised, isn't it?
Absolutely. It already is being scrutinised. I don't understand why it is, to be honest. I think it's refreshing when comedians such as John Cleese are challenging the stereotypes and bringing something refreshing.
Yes, we need... It's refreshing, I think, is that something new, something old but something new. Stephanie, thank you very much indeed. Now, tributes have been pouring in for Burt Bacharach, who's died at the grand age of 94.
With hits like I Say a Little Prayer and Walk On By, he was widely regarded as one of the world's greatest songwriters.
Well, let's talk to music industry veteran Nick Stewart. Morning to you, Nick. I mean, there's no doubt Burt Bacharach was in a league of his own, wasn't he?
Good morning to you both. He was, for my money, the finest songwriter who also arranged his own work of the 20th century. His name deserves to be up there with Gershwin, Berlin and Cole Porter. The statistics are extraordinary. 1,000 artists recorded his material. He won 6 Grammys, 3 Academy Awards, 2 in the same film, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, for the score and the #1 hit he had with B.J. Thomas, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. He was the sound of easy listening. Oh, there's a picture of myself, good Lord. And he and Hal David wrote some of the greatest, most enduring songs of the 60s and 70s. That is a compilation I did of his best material, for which I had the thrill of meeting him and presenting him with that disc.
What was that like, working with such an icon? Must have been incredible.
Well, it was a very good question, because I didn't actually have to. I didn't work for him. I just put the thing together. But I had the joy of meeting him. He was something of a Renaissance man. He was married 4 times. Once to the one of them being the actress, the lovely Angie Dickinson. He loved racehorses and racing. I remember going racing with him. He was a fascinating individual. He was a very hard taskmaster. When Cilla Black recorded her version of Alfie from the song for the film, it was done in Abbey Road under supervision of George Martin at the time, but they took 30 takes. Apocryphal story. They took 30 takes to get it right. He was a hard taskmaster, but he was a genius. And as I say, he wrote some of the most lovely romantic songs of the 60s and 70s. And his name with Hal David really needs to be written in gold.
It is one of those things. There are very few people, when you look back, who have created things which will, I mean, frankly, last for eternity, won't they, some of those tracks? I mean, we all, even the younger end of the spectrum, all know the songs.
Mm.
Good point. Know them and have recorded them. I mean, Elvis Costello is no longer a young man, but Elvis Costello, Noel Gallagher, Diana Krall, the new generation are coming up. Everybody wants to have a dip at a Burt Bacharach, Hal David song and do it themselves. When Oasis's debut album came out in 1994, Definitely Maybe, they put a poster of Burt Bacharach on the front cover. You can see it on the left-hand side. As a result of that, because of Britpop and that whole thing, people rediscovered Burt Bacharach. That actually was the genesis of the album you kindly put up. And a whole new generation discovered Burt Bacharach, and they will do so now on the very sad news of his death.
Yeah, they will indeed. Nick, really good to see you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Lovely. That's something to give you a smile this morning, remembering the great Burt Bacharach, an absolute legend. Look, we've got all the top stories for you coming up straight after the weather.
See you soon.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's yet another cold start in the south, with temperatures below freezing in many places, cloudier and milder elsewhere. And then for the vast majority, we're going to see that cloud spread across the UK through the day. At the moment, high pressure sits to the south of the UK. That's led to light winds and clear spells overnight in the south. But further north, a blustery wind coming from the southwest has brought a lot of cloud cover and some persistent rain over western hills of England, Wales, and more especially northern and western Scotland. Some heavier rain for a time for the Highlands. However, heading into the afternoon, whilst cloud spills southeastwards, the rain in the north will tend to ease. It will become more confined to western hills. Some breaks emerging in the northeast of Scotland, and towards the southeast we keep some brighter spells as well, where we get some brightness, 11, 12 Celsius possible, and fairly widely 9, 10, 11 degrees. So above average for the time of year, relatively mild, although with a lot of cloud cover and a keen breeze. That breeze will be gusty over the hills of northern England and Scotland. I don't think it will feel especially pleasant. During the night time on Friday night, we'll see a few clear spells across southern areas. Again, that will lead to a touch of frost in places, but less widespread compared with recent mornings. More widespread will be low cloud and some hill fog, especially for Wales and the southwest. And we'll continue to see a lot of cloud for Scotland, that cloud covering the hills of western Scotland and giving a few spots of rain and drizzle. 1 or 2 spots of rain and drizzle further south, predominantly over, say, the Welsh mountains and around coastal areas. But actually the trend into the afternoon on Saturday is for some sunshine to emerge across South Wales and the southwest. 12 or 13 Celsius where this happens, and northeast Scotland will see some brighter weather 12 or 13 again. And so for the vast majority, actually, Saturday will be cloudy but relatively mild. We'll see some breaks in the cloud later. Sunday starts off with a few fog patches, particularly again towards the southwest, but another mostly dry day is expected.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The death toll in Syria and Turkey has now surpassed 21,000.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Friday the 10th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Tamsin. Here are your top stories this morning.
Well, the humanitarian crisis following the earthquake that rocked Turkey and Syria is continuing. Hundreds of thousands of people are now homeless. The Red Cross is also warning of freezing temperatures and water shortages in the coming days.
Labour's Ashley Dalton has won the West Lancashire by-election after securing a majority of over 8,000 votes. But is this an early indicator of how a future general election could look? We'll bring you the results of our GB News People's Poll to show if the rest of the country feels the same way.
And half-term is approaching for students and parents ahead of the upcoming exam season. We'll bring you the best tips for resting and relaxing during the break, or good luck with that, without getting wrapped up in any travel chaos.
Well, as ever, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'd love to hear from you.
Now, just before we get to our top story this morning, we need to bring you this, because the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has just spoken about the latest UK economy data, the GDP figures that have been released from the Office for National Statistics, which show that despite what we were told, we are not, as yet, in a recession.
We have avoided recession. In fact, we're the fastest growing major country last year. Shows there is underlying resilience in the UK economy, but we are not out of the woods. Inflation is still much too high. That is causing pain for families up and down the country, which is why we need to stick to our plan to halve inflation. If we do that and play to our strengths in science and technology, we really can be one of the most prosperous countries in Europe.
Well, that's all incredibly positive, isn't it? I mean, we're pretty flat. We're teetering on the edge of recession, but we were told, Bank of England was saying months ago, wasn't it, that we're going to be in a long recession, perhaps the longest recession we'd ever seen. Shallow, but long. Well, we're not in recession yet. However, our guest earlier on was saying that what is happening politically, on both sides, actually, the arguments on both sides, and this idea that we need to increase interest rates to deal with inflation, he said it's the wrong sort of inflation. Increasing interest rates doesn't affect it. It will burn itself out. And so we're suffering unnecessarily as a result, which is an interesting point of view. But anyway, on the surface at least...
Prediction's not always correct either.
No. So it's certainly interesting information. There'll be analysis throughout the day here on GB News.
Now, the devastating earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria earlier this week is on course to become one of the deadliest in a decade.
Now, the death toll has risen to more than 21,000 following that 7.8 magnitude quake.
However, fears are now turning to the freezing temperatures as countless survivors face homelessness, with the UK sending thousands of thermal blankets overnight. Well, joining us this morning is the co-founder of Hand in Hand for Aid and Development, Fayed Al-Deri. Very good to see you on the programme this morning. Just tell me, is this correct that you and your daughter were stuck in the earthquake last Monday? Is that correct? Tell us your experience.
Yes, correct. I think it was the longest 100 seconds. I mean, it felt like 100 days at some point. When you are actually deep asleep, and all of a sudden you are awakened up by a real loud noise and banging. It felt like, yes, we experienced the barrel bombs dropped by Assad's regime in Aleppo, but this was something at a different stage. I mean, this was the destruction as well. I mean, for a 7.8 magnitude, it was horrendous. I mean, it was terrible. When you're in bed, tucked up away, warm, and then all of a sudden you have to run to the street with nothing on. I mean, it was snowing as well. I mean, the timing of it could not be any worse. During the snowy season, cold, it was -6 at the time. Now it's -11 at night, these times. Now, having to worry about yourself and also take some personal belongings, and also thinking about your staff, your colleagues, and then people around you. The children were screaming. I mean, families... Yes, we were told, yes, okay, you can go to your car, but not everyone has a car as well. So trying to think about everything around you. People lost belongings as well. I mean, when you try and reflect back, it's beyond imagination. I mean, living it is different from actually talking about it.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's horrific. I mean, thankfully, I mean, you're back in the UK now, obviously. The concern is for those people who are still in the area, because obviously you run Hand in Hand for Aid and Development. I mean, aid and development is going to be needed now for years to come for these affected areas, surely. I mean, it's going to be a major, major task.
Yeah, But which is, I mean, we always think about, okay, the conflict is almost like slowing down, but we still have fighting. So we thought, okay, we're going to move into the development phase. The reconstruction of Syria, rebuilding Syria. And then all of a sudden we've been hit back. I mean, I was working on a conference for the future of Syria, which will take place in March. And we were thinking, it's like, okay, we need to build livelihood, we need to build communities. And then all of a sudden we get hit back. And we don't only have to worry about Syria, we also have to worry about the host community in Turkey who've been affected. Now, when I sit back and imagine the city of Hatay or Antakya being totally devastated, totally destroyed, and then when I look at Gaziantep as well, the city where I spend most of the time, and then neighborhoods in Syria, towns and villages completely destroyed, we think, okay, now we used to rely on the livelihood and civilians for manpower, for labor. Now we are having to worry about more widows, more orphans to look after. We have to worry about more persons with disability as well to support. So whenever we think, okay, now we can go to the livelihood, no, we're being thrown back into emergency response, unfortunately. And this would last with us for many years to come as well.
What is Hand in Hand doing? Are you going to be going back to Syria?
Yes, I mean, for Hand in Hand for Aid and Development, we have been operational inside Syria since 2012, and we currently have 15 health facilities in the northwest of Syria. We also provide the water and sanitation and hygiene. So my team has been working tirelessly in Syria, supported by colleagues in Gaziantep as well. We are working now, we're trying to balance between the medical response and the shelter as well, shelter response, providing tents, providing blankets and warm space for civilians. So this is what Hand in Hand for Aid and Development is currently doing. We're also looking at how we can support persons with disability as well. So this is the current response for us now. And we also work in Yemen and Turkey as well, so in addition to Syria. But our main focus is on Syria for now, and hopefully build communities in the north and northwest Syria.
There's going to be a lot of work ahead, isn't there?
Good luck with all of that work.
Yeah, Fadi Al-Dairi, really good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just the most horrific situation. I think it's very difficult for us over here to get our head round exactly what has happened, that level of devastation.
As he says, it's different actually living it to just looking at it in images on television.
Anyway, look, it's 9 minutes past 8. Let's bring you up to date with some of the other stories today. And the UK has avoided falling into recession, according to the latest ONS figures. The Office for National Statistics show there was zero growth in the UK's economy in the final quarter of last year. December's GDP was down by 0.5%, but overall, the annual GDP rate grew by 4.1%. The Chancellor has warned the UK is not out of the woods yet.
Well, the fact that we have avoided recession, in fact, we're the fastest growing major country last year, shows there is underlying resilience in the UK economy. But we are not out of the woods. Inflation is still much too high. That is causing pain for families up and down the country, which is why we need to stick to our plan to halve inflation. If we do that and play to our strengths in science and technology, we really can be one of the most prosperous countries in Europe.
Now, Labour have held West Lancashire after Ashley Dalton was voted in as the country's newest MP. Miss Dalton secured 8,000 more votes than her Conservative counterpart for the region.
Now, let's bring you the latest results of the GBNews People's Poll.
The Conservative vote remains at a flat 21% this week, leaving Labour with half of the national vote, according to the poll.
This comes, of course, after that West Lancashire by-election. Ashley Dalton securing 8,000 more votes than her Conservative counterpart. A swing, although the turnout was very low, swing of 10.5% towards Labour.
So, how can the Conservatives expect to come back from this historic defeat? Well, we have our political reporter, Olivia Utley, and the former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Daniel Moylan. Thank you so much for joining us both this morning.
Morning.
Shall we start With you, Olivia, I mean, pretty strong defeat there. I mean, there's no debate there, is there?
No, it is a pretty strong defeat. I mean, we always have to have the usual caveats for all kinds of by-elections because we know that turnout is always very low. There's also the high probability that people are voting for the opposition as a sort of protest party because it doesn't matter what they're voting in this by-election. It's not going to change the governance of the country. So people who might otherwise be voting Conservative could be voting Labour just as a kind of dig in the ribs to Rishi Sunak. That said, the New Statesman have done some very good mapping this morning of what this by-election result would mean if a similar swing was replicated across the country. And it's very bad news for the Conservatives indeed. It would end up with 424 seats for Labour and just 138 seats for the Conservatives. So that is a big worry. I mean, what Conservative MPs are saying this morning is that this is the sort of result we'd expect to see after 12 years in power in a by-election. But yes, 12 years in power, it's going to be 13 years in power by the time we get round to the next elections. So how do they sort of square that up? How do the Conservatives get out of this mess? I mean, the problem for Rishi Sunak is that what he's doing at the moment seems to be sort of stabilising the economy, and that's what he said he was going to do when he came into power. But whether that's enough to actually get people out voting Conservative at the next election isn't so clear. I mean, zero growth over the last few months instead of entering into a recession. It's good news, I suppose, but not wonderful.
No, not wonderful. I mean, this is a huge problem, Lord Moylan, isn't it? How do they begin to tackle this? Because there are concerns that even with our People's poll, even on the Brexit issue, and who would handle Brexit better, Labour's beating the Tories on that as well.
Well, they're about level pegging on that, really. I mean, slightly beating it. I mean, the question is misconceived on Brexit because Brexit is done. The question really is, how do you handle the economy now? And I think, you know, you've got to have Jeremy Hunt is asking you to trust in his plan. And what are we seeing? What we're seeing is, amazingly, the fall has stopped, both in the polls and in the economy. I mean, you would think the way people talk about it, the economy was in free fall, but actually the economy is stable. It hasn't grown, but nor has it gone crashing down, and that's a platform from which you can start to rebuild. And as far as the opinion polls are concerned, and Labour's position and Conservative position, yeah, it is really, really bad, but it's quite interesting that what your poll shows is that the Conservatives have stayed stable from your last poll. They haven't actually fallen. So again, you know, Rishi Sunak has this one opportunity, I think, now, he and Jeremy Hunt, to show the leadership and the vision and start rebuilding from a base. I think they've reached the base and they can move forward now, but they've got to show that they can do that. And I think that requires a little bit more than simply saying steady as she goes, and it requires more than saying we're going to halve inflation, because halving inflation is still going to leave it at 6%. That's still really poisonous and will affect people's lives. They need to do better than that at getting inflation down and tax.
So how? How then do they... Or when... I suppose when is a better question, because that's more relevant to us, in a sense. We've got a budget in March, haven't we? I mean, is that going to be the first building block of trying to get things back?
Well, it would be nice to think so. Everything that's coming out of the Treasury is suggesting that nothing's going to happen in the budget in March and it's going to be steady as she goes. But the Chancellor has the opportunity and the time between now and the budget to rethink that, and I think he should rethink that and think how he should be taking matters forward. I mean, the idea of AstraZeneca building factories in Ireland explicitly because of tax, you know, we are in a competitive world and we need to stop deluding ourselves that we can carry on being a high-tax country and have lots of growth.
Just a quick point on our poll this morning with Boris faring well. What do you think about that, about his popularity still?
Well, Boris is always going to be a hugely popular figure, and he's also going to outrank, in the public imagination, almost any other political figure who is of his generation, because he's got that personality, he has that authenticity. And people, and he's got a certain vulnerability to him as well, I think, which people sort of want to mother Boris a little bit, if you see what I'm trying to say. So put all that together, and he's a real character, and he really appeals to people. Of course, you know, Rishi's appeal is essentially to say, I'm a technocrat, I fix things. That's not as inspiring.
No.
He's got to show that inspiration.
Lord Moylan, Olivia, mentioned the AstraZeneca issue and corporation tax going up to 25%, which is upsetting them, and will upset a lot of small businesses as well, the grassroots of the economy. This is a real pressure, isn't it, actually, on the Chancellor, who's turned around and said over recent weeks, we really want to go for growth. Well, growth is not increasing corporation tax, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. This is going to be a huge problem for Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt in the run-up to the next election. They've got to find a reason for people to positively come out and vote Conservative. That, essentially, is what the challenge is. Stabilising the economy is all very well, but zero growth isn't something that inspires you to get out and vote Tory. They claim, Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak, that raising taxes is the only way to combat inflation. But there were plenty who would say that rather than what they would argue, which is that we can't afford to cut taxes, we can't afford not to cut taxes. Because if you have corporation tax so high, then you will have big businesses moving abroad and you'll have small businesses, very sadly, just having to close their doors altogether. So what there are lots of Conservatives are hoping to see from the government in the upcoming months is a bottom-up growth strategy. They've talked a lot about the kind of top-down growth strategy, about investing in infrastructure, government investment in infrastructure. But what they need to do is to get people able to invest in businesses and able to grow their own businesses. And one obvious way to do that lots of people would argue, is to start cutting inflation tax rather than raising it.
Yeah.
Corporation tax.
Inflation tax. Now, that would be a different kettle of fish, wouldn't it? Olivia, Lord Moylan, thank you very much. Here's a question for you, Lord Moylan.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you're not expecting this one. I can promise you this.
No.
Have you ever worn or do you own a pair of cowboy boots?
No, I haven't. I've worn a cowboy hat. I've even got a picture, but I haven't ever worn the boots.
Ah, you see, because I was...
Is that being offered now? Could I try?
Well, you never know, because I quite fancy... Well, A, getting a kilt is how we started, but also getting some... I like cowboy boots, so a pair of cowboy boots.
Right.
Saying, can we do all this? Well, Jan has been in touch. Morning, Jan, saying, talking of cowboy boots, this is our wedding photo with our 2 children as page boys. We wanted to do something they could join in with, and as you can see, they played the part.
Brilliant.
That is
fantastic.
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Love it. Now, if that doesn't inspire me to go...
Go on.
It's not a case of buying them, is it? It's a case of wearing them with pride.
Having the courage.
to go and wear them out. This is the problem. Do you need bootleg jeans, which I haven't got?
No, I don't think so.
I don't know. Anyway, there you go. And the exclusive is Lord Moylan doesn't have a pair of cowboy boots. So we could run with that all. We could run with that all day.
Could run with that.
Yeah, we could. Now, Unison ambulance workers are set to stage strikes across England again today. The union strike involves ambulance workers across 5 service areas: London, Yorkshire, the South West, the North East and the North West.
It's also day 2 of strike action from the University and College Union. More than 70,000 employees are striking at 150 universities across the country.
Well, our reporter Ray Addison is at Waterloo for us this morning, where there is strike action taking place. Morning, Ray.
Yeah, good morning to you both. Here today at London Ambulance Service, we're going to see paramedics and ambulance technicians walking out, along with emergency care assistants and 999 call handlers as well. Of course, this all dates back to that pay rise offer, a 4% pay rise offer in September, which was turned down because it's below the rate of inflation. And ambulance workers and staff that I've been chatting to this morning, as they've been coming and going from their very busy shifts and looking absolutely exhausted, those leaving, by the way, are telling me that they, in many cases, are needing to use food banks and are struggling financially to a significant extent, and just very worried that also people are leaving the service, choosing to leave the service because of the pay, because of the conditions, and looking for alternative employment. Well, I'm joined now by Eddie Brand. He's an emergency medical technician. He's also the branch secretary of the London Ambulance Service for Unison. Eddie, good morning to you. Now, why have ambulance workers decided to take this action today?
I think, well, you mentioned about the pay rise that we should have got last April and ended up getting in September, which is obviously well below inflation. And it's also about safe staffing. It's about what we're doing for the public. We're unable to do a proper job. The job that we're paid for is because the social care system's a breaking point. If not, it's already broken. So we need to do something, because it's not fair on our staff and it's not fair on our patients.
In terms of the government, what do you need to hear from them to prevent further days of strike action? Obviously, I know other regions of the country are being balloted at the moment to see whether they will be going on strike. What do you need to hear? What's the bottom line?
Well, we just need them to start talking to our negotiators. They need to get our unions, all the unions, they need to get them in and get round the table and start meaningful talks. That's what we need.
In terms of patient safety, obviously we know that only the most emergency calls will be answered, cardiac arrests and so on, real risks to life. They're going to be the priority for the ambulance service today. What's your concern for patients today?
So we will provide life and limb cover from the picket lines. So our striking members, we've got delegations with our service. So our striking members at each picket line across London will respond. If the service can't cover it, the service, our pickets will respond to life-threatening calls, and we've done that over the last strikes that we've taken from December up until now. So there's going to be no different. We're going to help Londoners.
I was talking to one gentleman who was sweeping up along the streets here, and he was saying to me that even before the strikes started happening, there was trouble with the ambulance service response times, and a member of his family was denied an ambulance when they called for an emergency. They had to take her to the hospital themselves just because there was just such a shortage, and this is just going to exacerbate the problem, isn't it?
We don't want it to. That's the problem. We want them to get round the table. We've got to stand up for ourselves, and we've got to stand up for our members. Our members are telling us they want to take the action, and our members have had enough. We're being treated with contempt. So we don't want to hurt people. Of course we don't. And as I said, we will go to the life-threatening calls. We will help them. This may delay some ambulance calls for the people that are not as unwell or not as injured as the calls that we're going to go to. But we will do our best to look after them.
Eddie Brand, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Well, there you go. You've heard the views here from the picket line. That officially opens at 11 a.m. this morning, and I'll be speaking to many of those taking part in the action today, finding out about how and why they need this pay rise and how it's affecting their lives.
OK, Ray, thank you.
Now, when we return, we'll have the latest on the upcoming border staff walkout and how it could affect your half-term getaway.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
8:27, morning to you, watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Tamsin. This is what we've got coming up for you today.
As the crisis in Turkey and Syria continues to destroy people's lives, we'll be speaking to one actor who wants to make a difference after the earthquake left some of his own family missing. Tamer Hassan joins us at 8:50.
And to end the show, Rugby World Cup winner Ben Cohen is going to be here at 9:20, sharing his thoughts on England's future, as well as the Six Nations this weekend. And what to eat to keep fit as well.
I'm looking forward to that one. Well, as ever, please get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk.
And loads of you getting in touch this morning. Thank you. On the disability story that we're covering, and I was saying, I just think we need to get more people, we need to treat people with disabilities with more respect. John says, as a father of a son with autism and also a supervisor in the workplace, I'm confidently saying my son works harder than some others I've had to deal with. Employers should take on people with disabilities and give them a chance in the workplace. Absolutely.
Julie also saying, I was diagnosed 2 years ago with Asperger's syndrome at the age of 54. I had a successful career in banking, excuse me, up until a few years ago. OK, it's gone now. However, once diagnosed with this, my family and friends treat me so differently. Even my husband has turned on me and now left me on my own. Oh, Julie, no one wants a disabled person.
Well, that's awful. That's awful. I hope you can reach out and get some support that you need on that one. And I've been going on all morning because I'm going to Scotland next week and I want to buy a kilt. Can I really wear it? Joy says the Dixon surname is traditionally Scottish. It originated from the Earl Marshal Harvey de Keith, so go with a Keith tartan, which is a lovely green.
There you go.
So there you go. And laughing away in the background is Simon Calder, travel guru, who's here. Morning, Simon.
Good morning.
You go everywhere. Have you ever worn a kilt?
I have done when I was younger. Calder, of course, a good Scottish name. My brother, who actually has gone the extra mile and now lives in the middle of Scotland, he's got one, and he and his sons look great in their kilts. But I'm a bit of a whiz, but I can't wait to see yours.
I know.
The pictures.
Yeah. I really fancy it. Get a nice sporran and away we go. Love it.
Can I just pick up just on the points people have been making about disabled people in the workplace?
Yeah.
Fantastic place I was in earlier this week, Belfast City Hall, which, as you know, is one of the most magnificent Victorian buildings in the UK. It's also got now a cafe which is run by and for people with autism and other disabilities, and it's absolutely fantastic. So
wonderful.
I think stuff like that is good because it also gets the rest of us who perhaps may not interact with disabled people that often, it gets that interaction going, doesn't it? Which is really important.
And great to be having the conversation now, I think, raising awareness.
Well, look, it is half term for a lot of people, if not everyone. What do we do, Simon? What do we need to do to avoid traffic chaos? What are we expecting?
OK, well, good luck, everybody, is the first thing to say.
No.
Yes, many schools across the UK breaking up for the half-term holiday. today, and you can absolutely be certain that there will be families flocking to Dover and Folkestone because they will be heading off to the Alps, maybe to Disneyland Paris, maybe even to the south of France in their cars. Now, for once, the travel gods seem to be smiling, at least going outbound, because there was a big close down of Calais port yesterday, but it is now up and running with ships sailing normally between the two. Still a backup of trucks there, but if you're travelling by car, it should be okay. The problem is going to be when you come back, because there's a strike by 1,000 UK Border Force officers working for the PCS union. Now, we've talked about this just before Christmas when they began a 10-day strike. But this one is different. It is aimed squarely at the so-called juxtaposed border controls in France. So that's the Port of Calais, Eurotunnel terminal at Coquelles, and the Port of Dunkirk as well. And you've normally got UK Border Force staff there who check everything. So effectively you get through and you're in the UK. They, or 1,000 of them, will be walking out. And, well, yesterday, the Home Office said, be prepared for disruption. It could be very tricky out there.
It's always at half term as well, isn't it? But if you don't want...
I'm so sorry, Tamsin. Just say, and that's coming back, and it's the 17th, 18th, 19th, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
So you can get there, you just can't come home, which I suppose might be a good thing. An extra couple of days holiday.
Well, yes, but as long as you don't have to spend it just queuing up for passport control. Difficult to say. They've got contingency measures in place, which will include having non-striking officers from the UK, typically from places like Gatwick Airport, sent out to cover, and that will then possibly mean you have military people at airports actually inside the UK.
I was going to say, because we've got a plethora of spare staff at the moment, haven't we?
And so therefore they're warning that there could be disruption elsewhere.
All right, what about staycations then?
Yeah, well, they're going to be, first of all, quite expensive, but secondly, next weekend again, and this is the end of the half term for a lot of people. Some schools it's the beginning of the half term, but you will not be able to travel direct from Scotland to London by train. They're closing both the East Coast and the West Coast main line for engineering works. Network Rail blaming bad weather, flooding and strikes. They say they've got a backlog because of the many rail disputes. One bit of good news on the horizon, if you are travelling by train, as I do, there are no strikes at the moment that are planned.
OK, that's your mode of transport then.
I'm just seeing a note, Simon, to say, ask about London to Geneva flight prices.
Oh, my goodness. I've just been doing some work this morning to see if you thought, we haven't booked anything, we've got to get away, let's just go skiing. Well, that's a good idea, but I've just checked and you are at Concorde levels of pricing per mile. EasyJet flying out tomorrow from Gatwick, middle of the day, coming back middle of the day a week later, £1,336 return. That's without luggage. That's £1.50 a mile. That's the same price that Concorde was charging before it was closed down 20 years ago. But you're not travelling supersonic and you're not getting champagne on your flight. There is one deal, though, which I found. London to Madrid tomorrow on Iberia, £125 return, coming back a week later. And if you're in Madrid, you can just hop on the train, head down to Malaga.
Yeah, perfect. That sounds more like it. Simon, thank you very much indeed. Good to see you. Look, we've got much more to come for you, including the biggest stories from the papers with Liz Kershaw and Andy McDonald in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 8:38. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Tamsin.
Good morning. Let's take a look at today's front pages for you. The Guardian leads with a story about a major upheaval in the view taken by the Church of England on same-sex marriage.
The Mail reports the Treasury is under pressure to cut taxes after AstraZeneca criticised how expensive it was to do business in the UK.
The Express says anger is growing because greedy banks are refusing to pass on higher interest rates to savers.
The Mirror has money-saving expert Martin Lewis, who says plans to raise the cap on energy bills would be a national act of harm.
Well, time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning is Assistant Editor of the London Finance Journal, Andy MacDonald, and broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Right, what are we starting with, Liz? Ambulance response times in the Mail?
Well, I thought we could do with some good news, couldn't we?
Yes, we could.
And you have mentioned this morning, but ambulance response times have drastically improved after the NHS faced one of its worst ever winters. And we will all remember the pictures before and after Christmas of ambulances, sometimes being outside attending to a patient for 12 hours or so because they couldn't get them into A&E.
Yeah.
It was so busy. So this is good news because it was terrifying. I was sitting on the sofa going like, oh, I hope I don't have a heart attack because... And I'm not making light of this, but I was genuinely worried that if anybody, including me, people I care about, were to have a heart attack or stroke or anything like that. It was like an hour and a half waiting.
Yeah.
And I remember having to bundle my friend into my own car once when she fell and cracked her head on the kitchen floor. And they said, oh, it's going to be an hour. You'll have to put her in your own car. That was terrifying to have that responsibility. Anyway, it just brings me to another point that ambulances were outside because A&E was rammed, because A&E couldn't get people through because there were no beds on the wards. So my own personal example in the last 7 days of why this is happening, somebody in my family rang the GP with a sore throat, seriously sore throat, couldn't get an appointment, got a call from the GP, prescribed him some basic bog standard antibiotics, penicillin. 2 days later, couldn't swallow the pills, couldn't drink water, was absolutely... I'd had no food for 3 days. We rang again, ring 111, we rang them, ring the GP, rang that. Finally, he got, after it was stressed he was situated, he got called in. Soon as she saw him, he must go into hospital, straight to A&E, triaged in an hour, helped by a letter from the doctor, another 4 hours up to the ward. So not so bad. The main thing that I learnt from all this was when it came for him to leave, he sat by the bed from 9:30 in the morning when he was told he could go home until 6 o'clock when his drugs arrived from the pharmacy and he couldn't leave without them. And I was asking, why are these drugs taking so long? Oh, well, they do the rounds of the whole hospital, dropping them off. Sort it out, because presumably the reason he was sitting in A&E for 4 or 5 hours waiting for a bed was because somebody was sitting by a chair on a ward waiting for the drugs. And the nurses, I'm not blaming them, they were just going, well, that's the system. Well, can't we look at the system, think outside the box and think that doesn't work?
Why can't they write you a script and then you just go off to the hospital? Well, the local pharmacy or the hospital pharmacy.
We said, can we not go down ourselves and collect it? Oh, no, you can't do that.
Well, they have to have discharge notes as well, so it's
no, that was all done. That was all done. It was purely waiting for the drugs from the pharmacy. That, to me, that's so easily solved by good management.
Yeah, I agree. Let's have a look at savings rates. Should we? Interest rates are going up. But what about our savings, Andy?
Yeah, this is the front page of the Express. It's a bit of a nightmare, really. You know, people are getting quite angry at the Bank of England because they're just refusing to kind of pass up on higher interest rates to savers, but they're putting up interest rates for borrowers. So it's a bit baffling. It's gone up 3.9% since December of 2021, and everyone's just getting a bit angry.
Well, it's up to individual banks, aren't they? I mean, I have to say, I've got one savings account where they now pay 3%, which seems miraculous. It's just gone up again. There's no letters in, we put it up again. But I've got another bank account where they pay absolutely nothing.
Yeah, Lloyds have been getting quite a lot of praise. I don't know whether your savings account's Lloyds, but Lloyds have apparently been doing a pretty good job, whereas other banks, so we're not going to name them for legal purposes, of course, haven't been doing quite as good a job, and people aren't very pleased. And it was posed to the Governor of the Bank of England in the scrutiny committee, I think it was either yesterday or the day before, and he was like, it's not really my job, which it is and it isn't. I'm sure if he said something, there would be great influence.
Saving, either, does it?
Well, there's meant to be a benefit. It's all we always say. Well, it's bad news for homeowners if you've got a mortgage. Good news for savers. Well, it's just bad news for mortgage people, isn't it? Generally.
Well, as that economist was saying earlier, inflation isn't being caused by demand-led inflation, overspending on luxury goods. So presumably, if they wanted to take money out of the money supply circulating, it'd be a really good thing if the Bank of England and the Treasury encouraged banks to put up interest rates on savings, because then people would be more likely to stash it away.
Yeah.
If you have £20,000 as an example, I read in the paper the other day, and you put it in a savings account, that means you might get about £300 interest on it in 12 months. Well, what's inflation done to that by then?
Well, yeah, that's true. Should we lighten it up a bit?
I was just about to say, should we go to or the other?
I was going to go. Well, yeah, go on.
Take that star. Howard Donald has so many cars, he has to store some of them at his friends' houses. No problem saving here.
Yeah, this is page 21 of the Daily Mirror, and it's a real contrast to talking about the inflation and being unable to pay the bills. Yeah. And he's got, I think he said he's got about 17.
Wow.
About 17. How
About
can
17,
you have about
not
17?
quite sure.
He's not entirely sure,
counted
and
them.
he's complaining to his wife that he just leaves them at his mates' garages, and then he's like, "Oh, where have they gone?" And Mark Jeffries, the showbiz editor of the Mirror, wasn't amazingly sympathetic. But from the pictures that have been attached on this article, he does have quite a nice collection, in all fairness. But it's just completely out of reality, isn't it? You know.
Well, it is, but he's a major pop star. I can't be too upset that he's got them. It's sort of good on. He's worked for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's
That
just
is a car, isn't
it's
it?
just a bit sad that he forgets how many cars he has and where he's parked them.
Yeah, well, this is it.
I'm
You've
the
got a
same.
topic.
I'm similar.
Well, you've got quite a few cars,
Not
actually.
because they're all luxury vehicles, because I'd like to get my money's worth, and I can't part with anything. So when I get a new car, I find it hard to get rid of the last one.
You do.
If it's all paid for, and they're all lining up outside the house.
Yeah.
Will you be able to use
Look,
when
it's
you, Les,
disgusting.
comes in?
Yeah. Sort it out.
Disgraceful.
Sort
Not
it
luxury
out.
cars. How many Jags have you? Anyway, let's have a look at what is the worst hot dog?
This is it's a football ground, in Sheffield, and have we got a photo of this offending
I don't know,
snack?
hopefully.
Anyway, it's £5.50, and
Right.
if you go to a football match, look at the state of that. Is that? I'll ask you, Stephen. Is that a quality sausage?
No, that is not a quality
No.
sausage.
You need a quality sausage.
And where's the bit of salad or something?
It's Sheffield United, £5.50. The salad, there's no sauce, and it's a dried-up bun. And I know that the hospitality industry has been struggling in the last 3 years, but I had some soup.
You can afford a bit of clover.
I had some soup to take on the train the other day, and it was £4.95 for a tub of soup. And I just couldn't believe it. And if you had that every day, you know, commuting, you could go on a luxury holiday for £1,200.
Yeah.
So that's the way I look at it. So,
I never understand these people, though, who work in towns and things and always you buy out and buy coffees and
sandwiches.
Take a flask.
Yeah.
I always used to take a flask in our old place, because they had to pay for coffees. Take a flask and sandwiches.
Yeah.
I mean, this Sheffield United, this sausage, you know, whoever's bought it will have bought a flat carling for about £7 as well. So this will have put him back 12 or 13 quid. And it's just sad, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably hungry after watching the match.
Well, I don't know who Sheffield United's star player is, but I'm sure they aren't fed that kind of muck.
No, that is a disgrace.
We're going to be
I have
talking
say.
about healthy eating.
Oh, healthy eating a little bit later on with Ben Cohen, no less.
Oh, he used to play rugby for Northampton.
Yeah, well, he's not coming in, Liz, so...
Oh, right. Well, I've met him loads of times.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Liz, Andy, thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Good to see you. Now, just an old mate of mine, really, though I haven't seen him for ages, the British-Turkish actor Tamer Hassan has revealed members of his family are now lost from the earthquakes that have struck Turkey and Syria on Monday.
He's best known for his role in the movie The Football Factory and is now leading a campaign to raise £100,000 to provide humanitarian support for people affected by the disaster.
Yeah, and you'll know him from NCIS. If you're a fan of NCIS, which I'm a huge fan. Anyway, Tamer joins us now. Tamer, it's really good to see you this morning. Tell us what is going on with your family. What do you know at this stage?
We've had good news. We had some good news yesterday that they had been found early hours of the morning. We was told that they were found, and they're safe and well by the grace of God. So thank you for everyone's prayers and well wishes. So we don't know too much information now, but they have been found, which is amazing.
It's amazing, but I mean, I know you're trying to raise money as well to help people out there. I mean, it's the scale of it which just seems so appalling.
For us, I came out to Cyprus, and we're all sort of come together as one. The island here was devastated by the disaster, the humanitarian disaster. The scale of it was, nobody envisaged it to be that big and that devastating. So what we're doing, we're here. The whole country's come together, like I said, loading lorries, loading planes, sending everything over there. I'll be travelling hopefully tomorrow to be on the ground there to see how we can find ways in and how we can help on the ground there, basically getting our hands dirty.
So is that it? Is practical work you're doing, or are you taking out any provisions?
Provisions meaning?
Well, we've heard about the UK taking blankets, for example. Are you just going out there, literally, you said you're going to get stuck in?
Sorry. The UK's been amazing. The whole world's been amazing. The government over there has now stepped up and doing everything they can. But for us, clothes, blankets, batteries, power packs, warm clothes, they're desperate for heated blankets as well, battery-operated heated blankets, water, food. I think it's getting worse. It's not getting any better. We are now at this early stage even thinking about how we're going to help the survivors. The cold weather's destroying everyone over there. The weather's horrendous. What's going on there is tough. Pulling people out of the rubble and saving lives is one thing, but now we have to maintain and help the people that have survived. They've lost their homes. They've lost literally everything. They've got nowhere to live. And for us now, this humanitarian project that we've put together isn't just going to be sort of while this is going on, but it's going to be an ongoing thing for us to help rebuild and do what we can now.
Because this is the problem, isn't it? But there's always a focus on when something horrific happens like this, there's always a focus on rescue and recovery, isn't there? Which, of course, is vital. Of course it's vital. But it's a longer-term effect. When you've got towns and cities absolutely devastated, it's what happens to those people over the next couple of years.
What happens to them within the next couple of days and the next couple of weeks? If you can understand that 11 cities have literally been flattened, everybody's lost their homes, they're out on the streets. Governments are trying to put up tents, but you're talking about millions and millions of people across Turkey that are now homeless, sitting in the cold, freezing. So these are the things that we have to start thinking about, as well as manpower on the ground and people digging people up and saving lives, which is always going to be page one, always going to be the first thing that we have to do with these humanitarian disasters. But now, tents, battery packs, power supplies, generators, warm clothes, food. And, I can say over the last 2 days that what's been happening there has been overwhelmingly amazing. The way the world and people have come together, especially the UK as well, Greece, Cyprus, all the neighbouring countries have come together to help what's going on there. We mustn't forget Syria. We must not forget what's going on in Syria as well. I can understand a lot of focus is on Turkey, but what Syria is going through as well, previously to this disaster, what they went through and what they're going through now, we must not forget Syria. We must send Syria as much help as we can as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, Tamer, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Always indeed. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And we have GoFund pages. We have people. If everyone could just donate and do as much as they can, even if they can't donate, if they could please share the GoFund pages that are there, it would be much appreciated.
Yeah, we've got to keep putting that address on the screen so people can see that. If you're listening on the radio, it's GoFundMe.com. Please help the people of Turkey with a dash in between each word, so you can find all the stuff you need to do there. Tamer, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, what a relief for him that his family are okay.
Such a relief.
But there's so many people who either their families aren't okay or they just don't know at this stage, because communication's a huge issue as well, so they just don't know, which is horrific in and of itself.
Painful.
But anyway, let's hope Tamer can raise plenty of money there, and that will be put to good use, helping people directly. So that's all good.
Absolutely.
Look, we've got all the top stories still to come, haven't we?
See you soon. Don't go away.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's yet another cold start in the south, with temperatures below freezing in many places, cloudier and milder elsewhere. And then for the vast majority, we're going to see that cloud spread across the UK through the day. At the moment, high pressure sits to the south of the UK. That's led to light winds and clear spells overnight in the south. But further north, a blustery wind coming from the southwest has brought a lot of cloud cover and some persistent rain over western hills of England, Wales, and more especially northern and western Scotland. Some heavier rain for a time for the Highlands.
However, heading into the afternoon, whilst cloud spills southeastwards, the rain in the north will tend to ease. It will become more confined to western hills. Some breaks emerging in the northeast of Scotland, and towards the southeast we keep some brighter spells as well. Where we get some brightness, 11, 12 Celsius possible, and fairly widely 9, 10, 11 degrees. So above average for the time of year, relatively mild, although with a lot of cloud cover and a keen breeze. That breeze will be gusty over the hills of northern England and Scotland. I don't think it will feel especially pleasant. During the night time on Friday night, we'll see a few clear spells across southern areas. Again, that will lead to a touch of frost in places, but less widespread compared with recent mornings. More widespread will be low cloud and some hill fog, especially for Wales and the southwest. And we'll continue to see a lot of cloud for Scotland, that cloud covering the hills of western Scotland and giving a few spots of rain and drizzle. 1 or 2 spots of rain and drizzle further south, predominantly over, say, the Welsh mountains and around coastal areas. But actually the trend into the afternoon on Saturday is for some sunshine to emerge across South Wales and the southwest. 12 or 13 Celsius where this happens, and northeast Scotland will see some brighter weather, 12 or 13 again. And so for the vast majority, actually, Saturday will be cloudy but relatively mild. We'll see some breaks in the cloud later. Sunday starts off with a few fog patches, particularly again towards the southwest, but another mostly dry day is expected.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The death toll in Syria and Turkey has now passed 21,000.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 10th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Tamsin. Here are your top stories this morning.
The humanitarian crisis following the earthquake that rocked both Turkey and Syria is continuing to devastate both countries. Hundreds of thousands of people are now homeless, with the Red Cross also warning of freezing temperatures and water shortages in the coming days.
Labour's Ashley Dalton has won the West Lancashire by-election after securing a majority of more than 8,000 votes. But is it an early indicator of how a future general election could look? We'll bring you the results of the GB News People's Poll to show if the rest of the country feels the same way.
And ahead of the Six Nations this weekend, we speak to English rugby legend Ben Cohen about the tournament and how changing your diet could be the secret key to sporting success.
We'd love to hear from you this morning. Anything you want to talk about, then you can just get in touch. You know how to do it. Drop us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, the devastating earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria earlier this week is on course to become one of the deadliest in a decade as the death toll rises to more than 21,000.
Yeah, but sadly, the problems have only just begun for those affected. Earlier, we spoke to Yusuf Erim, editor of TRT World, who voiced his concerns with those left dealing with the aftermath.
Is still dire. International rescue crews, local rescue crews, they're working around the clock. There's been a lot of people pulled out of the rubble despite it being the fourth day. So we're seeing how resilient the human body is, being able to withstand those sub-zero temperatures at night, dehydration, trauma wounds and whatnot. And rescue crews will continue probably working for the next 2 to 3 days. But it looks like the death toll most likely is going to rise much more dramatically now in these coming days as they're working deeper and deeper into the rubble. Most of the bodies that they reach, unfortunately, are lifeless. So I expect that death toll, unfortunately, to eclipse 50,000. But the biggest problem right now is the homeless people. There's over 1 million people that are homeless right now. Either their buildings have collapsed or received significant structural damage and they can't go back. So that's the biggest challenge right now facing the Turkish government.
Well, the UK is in the process of sending more aid to those who are suffering in these deadly conditions. GB News will be bringing you updates on this unfolding story throughout the day.
Well, now, let's bring you the latest results, should we, of the GB News People's Poll.
Well, the Conservative vote remains at a flat 21% this week, leaving Labour with half of the national vote, according to the poll.
This comes just after the West Lancashire by-election, of course, which saw Labour's Ashley Dalton as the new MP, securing 8,000 more votes than her Conservative counterpart for the region. That's a swing of 10.5%.
Well, let's get some reaction with our political reporter, Olivia Utley. Good to see you, Olivia. So, not a great big turnout, in fact. Was it a foregone conclusion, do you think?
Well, it was widely predicted that Labour were going to win this by-election with quite a big swing. Of course, there are the usual caveats for by-elections, which is that turnout is often low and that people are prepared to use their vote in a by-election as a protest vote. They know it's not going to change who governs the country, so even if they agree broadly with the Conservatives, they might vote Labour just as a kind of kick up to Rishi Sunak. But that said, it really is bad news for the Conservatives. This is a 10.5% swing, which, if replicated around the country, would mean 424 seats for Labour and only 138 for the Conservatives. That would be putting us into pretty much unprecedented territory. So the Conservatives know that they really have a battle on their hands now. And what makes it tricky is that there is still a battle going on for the heart of the Conservative Party, whether the Conservative Party going into the next election is going to be a tax-cutting party or the sort of fiscally prudent party that Rishi Sunak seems to be cultivating, where the main goal is to lower inflation and never mind how high taxes are. So this is the question which is going to be buzzing around Conservative MPs' minds in the months ahead. And a result like this is likely to entrench division in the party, if anything, because both sides, both factions, the high tax and the low tax faction, will think, well, my way is the only way to fix this.
But are we making a fair analysis in the sense that isn't there and I'm not saying this is government policy, but isn't there an argument to say that, look, actually the government isn't that conservative at the moment, but they're working under emergency circumstances. There's been chaos for whatever reason. We're trying to balance it all out. Once it's settled, then we can be more conservative in the run-up to an election.
Well, absolutely, and that is the argument that Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, and let's not forget, they have plenty of supporters both inside the Conservative Parliamentary Party and in the wider Conservative Party. But those on the other side, the Conservative Growth Coalition, as they're styling themselves, this caucus led by Liz Truss and Simon Clarke, were very much growing in number. They believe that in emergency circumstances like this, you have to have serious Conservative policies, essentially that we can't afford, we're in desperate economic state, so you can't afford to keep taxes high. And one good example of this is corporation tax. Of course, if you keep corporation tax high, then there's a danger of businesses moving overseas and that putting a bit of a lid on the amount that we're able to grow. So there are arguments on both sides, and the debate is definitely getting more and more fierce. But one thing we do know is that division within the Conservative Party is definitely not helpful for the Conservatives' election prospects.
Of course, we've heard this morning that we've avoided a recession. Is that going to help, do you think?
Well, I mean, it is good news in that what Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak set out to do was stabilise Britain's economy. And I think they can quite safely say, well, we've made a good start on that. That said, what we're looking at is, rather than negative growth, which would indicate a recession, we're looking at zero growth, so teetering on the edge of a recession, but not quite in a recession. Now, Jeremy Hunt has gone out this morning and done a good job of painting this as a very positive picture, but whether, we're the Conservative Party, we can achieve zero growth is enough to get people out voting Conservative at the next election is another question.
Well, yeah, I mean, in essence, it's not, but as you say, it's not bad news.
It's not bad news. The problem for the Conservatives is that with their poll ratings this low, it's not about stabilising poll ratings, it's about finding a way to drag them up again. And that is really going to be the challenge for the party.
Yeah, it's a bit of a wait and see, though, isn't it? I mean, it's back to that old argument of stabilise first. It may be, I suppose, if come the summer, they're then saying, oh, well, actually, well, we can do this now, or we can reduce corporation tax again, and we can reduce some income taxes again.
Exactly, and this is what Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt are hoping for, that they will, because of their economic restraint, we will see some more fiscal headroom, as they call it, perhaps not in this March budget, but at least in the autumn statement. And once you've got that fiscal headroom, then, as you say, there's room to be able to lower taxes. And if they can achieve that, then, you know, their prospects do begin to look up a bit. But do they have the time to do all this before the next election, which really isn't very long away now?
No, not far at all. I was going to say they've got some work to do. It's next year, right?
Exactly.
Probably. Have we got Tulip Sadiq? No, we haven't. So she's running a little bit late. So we'll keep chatting to you, if that's all right, Olivia, for a little bit, because it's interesting you talk about the divisions within the Conservative Party. Part of the GBNews People's poll was showing how Boris Johnson is the most popular Prime Minister since 2019. In a way, that's no surprise, because he's the only one who was actually elected by the people, right? However, of course, people jump on that and say, well, it's time he was running for the top job again. And, of course, there was talk about Liz Truss a week ago. Is she going to go for, frontline politics again and all this sort of thing? Anyone who pushes for that in the Conservative Party, and there are some, they've got to be crackers, haven't they? And it says that's a divided party loses elections and it would just split the party wide open, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very tricky situation that Rishi Sunak finds himself in. He's got thorns in both sides in the form of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. I think I'm right in saying it's pretty much unprecedented to have two former Prime Ministers on the back benches. And yes, definitely, a divided party is the last thing that the Prime Minister needs. And we already know that he's facing all of these, sleaze allegations. We've got the Dominic Raab ongoing allegation. The Deem Zahawi situation was a big blow for the Prime Minister, and that has divided the party. There are people who feel that he hasn't handled that very sensibly. He should have been more decisive. A more experienced politician would have dug the knife into Zahawi sooner. And of course we know that there are these big tax arguments that centre the party. So Sunak is leading a very divided party. There are plenty in the party who are now so fed up that they think another option, any other option. And the thing about Boris Johnson is that what Rishi Sunak hasn't managed to do, as we've discussed, he's managed to sort of stabilise the party. He's put things on the sort of straight and narrow. He's come across as a competent figure, a safe pair of hands. But he hasn't managed to find a sort of inspirational message to inspire people to go out and vote Conservative in the next election. Boris Johnson's fans believe that he is the person who can do that. He's prepared to make sort of big gestures. He was always very concerned about his legacy, and we saw that in the way that he helped Ukraine, and having Zelensky stand up in Parliament and name-check Boris Johnson for being the leader of the West's support against Ukraine is pretty huge. So there are these arguments for Boris coming back, which are beginning to circulate. And, of course, he has lots of support among the donors in the party, which is another problem for Rishi Sunak. But essentially, yes, Rishi Sunak is in a sticky situation.
But it's interesting with Boris Johnson, though, isn't it? Because huge charisma, very charming. You can't help... If you're leaning in that direction, he's likely to win you over, right? A bit Marmite, but there you go. But it's policy detail, short on the detail. And isn't it detail that the government is saying, this is what we need now? We need to really lock down on the detail.
Yes, and that is definitely Sunak's argument. And he needs to show, because we are seeing now, for the first time really, Labour coming up with very detailed policy plans for what we could expect from a Labour government after 2024. And a few weeks ago, we had a whole slew of shadow ministers coming out and explaining in forensic detail how they would shake up their departments. We had Jonathan Ashworth promising a huge shake-up of the welfare state, the way that job centres work, the way that pensions work. We had Bridget Phillipson promising huge reform on childcare, free childcare for everyone between 0 and 11. So, as you say, the Conservative has to do something to tackle that. And whether the person to lead that is a kind of Boris Johnson-style figure, huge charisma and light on detail, isn't clear. Although there's a big problem for the Conservatives about losing the red wall. They are reliant on the red wall. And what we do know is that Boris Johnson, at least in 2019, was, perhaps rather strangely, very popular in the north of England.
Yeah, no, indeed.
Don't know whether he wants it, though, do we?
No, we don't. Olivia, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
OK, thankfully, we can say the Shadow Economy and Treasury Minister, Tulip Sadiq, is available now. Good to see you this morning. We've got to say congratulations on the by-election victory last night. What do you make of... I mean, it's a big swing to Labour, right? It's a big swing. But are we seeing people just disengaging from politics? Because the turnout was so low, it was terrible.
Good morning. So, as you say, it was a swing to Labour. We had a 10% swing and it was a 11% swing against the Conservatives. So, all in all, a good result for the Labour Party. I've already heard Ashley, our new latest MP, on the radio talking about how she's going to fight for the children's A&E, which was closed in her constituency before COVID, and she wants it to reopen. So she's going to be a doughty champion for her constituents in Parliament. But you're absolutely right to say that it does feel like people are disengaging from politics a little bit because the turnout was so low. I mean, there's a couple of factors. First of all, people do have election fatigue. I mean, we have had election after election after election, and I think in a sense people are sick of the snap elections and voting. It's not so much a novelty. By-elections do tend to have less of a turnout than the national election because less people know about it. And don't forget, it's also very cold. It's very cold and people don't want to go out and vote. But if you're asking me if I'm disappointed that more people didn't vote, of course I am. I mean, I'm a politician. I think people should go and exercise their democratic rights. So, in a sense, a bit disappointing about the turnout, but a great success for Ashley and for the Labour team out there who fought so hard to make sure we not only retained the seat, but got it with a huge swing to the Labour Party.
Now, we've been hearing from the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, this morning, saying we've avoided a recession, but we're not out of the woods yet, particularly when it comes to inflation, and that if we stick to the plan to halve inflation this year, then we can be confident of having among the best prospects for growth anywhere in Europe. What do you say to his comment this morning?
Well, the Chancellor's always been very diplomatic, and I think his choice of words is interesting. We are not in a recession, technically, but that's by the skin of our teeth. And if you ask my constituents in Hampstead and Kilburn how they're feeling about the cost of living crisis, they will tell you they very much feel that they are in recession, even though we're technically, by economic terms, not in a recession, because they're struggling to make ends meet. They can't put the heating on. They can't buy basic food items like eggs, like milk, like bread. So for me, I'm very worried. I want the Conservatives to come up with a proper plan for growth. I looked at the figures, and the OECD has said that we're predicted to have the lowest growth of any country in the G7 this year. Our economy has been stagnant for the best part of last year. For 6 months, we had 0.0% growth. That's not something to be applauding and talking about. I've just mentioned the plan for growth. The Conservatives have come up with 8 plans for growth since 2010, 4 in this Parliament, and they've achieved nothing. They're even losing the confidence of businesses. The head of the CABI said that the ambitions is too low of the government. I think the phrase he used is unambitious plans to get us out of this mess. And I'm worried. Businesses losing confidence, our constituents are struggling, economy is not growing. We have to do something.
Would you go back to the 19% or if you were in power next week, scrap the increase in corporation tax? Would that be a key policy for you?
I mean, it'd be amazing to be in government next week. I don't think that's going to happen somehow. What we have said for the immediate short-term measures is that in the budget, there's 2 things that we want to prioritise. One thing is strengthening the windfall tax. I know the government have brought in a windfall tax, but we're asking them to strengthen it, which would bring in £13 billion. In terms of strengthening it, I don't know how much you want me to go into detail, but what we want is to be backdated to January 2022, when Labour first asked for the windfall tax. We think the oil and gas rates should be taxed at the same rate as they are in Norway. We also think there's a loophole, which is the fossil fuel investment loophole. That should be closed, which would bring in £13 billion, because we really think the energy bills that are coming in April are going to be sky high for people, and we think by bringing in the strengthened windfall tax, we can avoid that. But the second thing we've asked the Chancellor to look at and the government to look at is whether there's any headroom in the budget to stop the increase in fuel duty at any cost in April. We think that should be a key priority for the government, and we hope they will accept that in the budget. Independent commentators are saying they may be resourced to stop the increase in fuel duty, so we're hoping that will happen in the budget as well.
OK, and people may well accept that. We're almost out of time, Tulip, but what you didn't do is answer the question as to whether you'd reverse the corporation tax increase.
Well, we will make a decision on that when we are in government. It's all very well to say if you were in government next week, but we're not going to be in government next week because there's no election in sight. At the time when the election comes, we will look at the state of the economy, we'll look at the cost of living crisis, we'll look at how much resource there is, and based on that, we will make predictions on what we tax and what taxes we reverse. Of course, our plans will be different to the Tories, but at this point, it's difficult to say because we genuinely don't know what numbers we'll be playing with.
Tulip Sadiq, we've got to leave it there, but good to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Well, after the break, Ben Cohen will be with us as he looks ahead to the Six Nations this weekend. Stay with us.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. Do you have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Tamsin.
Well, the Six Nations has kicked off once again, seeing England narrowly defeated by Scotland in the opening game last weekend.
But lucky for us, Ben Cohen knows exactly what it takes to become a champion. He says it starts with what you eat. He joins us now. Ben, morning to you.
Morning, how are you?
Thanks good to see. It's good to see. Look, we've got to start off with a bit of the rugby because England versus Italy tomorrow. England's got to be nervous, haven't they?
Quite rightly so, yeah. They're 7 games away from a World Cup. They've got to understand the pressure they are and where they are at the moment, which I'm sure they do. And they've got to get into winning ways and get into some sort of habit of winning and playing well, and how they, see. They've got to basically buy into Steve Borthwick's vision of how he wants to play and the environment that he wants to create. And at the moment, you see, England have got into that habit of not playing very well and losing, and that's because maybe Eddie had probably gone past his time a bit. But Eddie was a great coach, and he does some great things with England, and he's got a great bunch of players. The biggest thing that England have to do is really work on their mindset, and mindset's a massive part of being able to perform under pressure and making those games that you nearly lose into just wins, and having that sort of habit of to go into the World Cup with some kind of momentum, because they're not going to change everything now with 7 games to go and playing in the World Cup in 6 months' time. So they've got to get an understanding of where they are mentally.
Mindset and diet, you would say. Now, you're vegan, aren't you? And you strongly believe that actually eating a plant-based diet can enhance performance for sports people. How does that work?
How does that work? I mean, that's actually a very good question. A journey that I went on to understand what foods do, how you digest them, and what you can get out of them. And I nearly died about 6 years ago, and through stress. And I had pericarditis, glandular fever, and sepsis, and I really took a long look at myself in respect of saying, well, actually, what is my diet? How can I get the best and rebuild my immune system after having glandular fever? And so I looked at veganism, and it's something, plant-based foods really, and I look at the power of that and understanding that, like, you know, where your protein comes from. Just as it's meat, it can come from kidney beans, and you've probably got more protein in kidney beans than a steak. So it's that sort of mental awareness really. And what Nomo have done, who I've teamed up with his chocolate bar, talking about alternatives in vegan foods and actually the variety of what's out there now. You know, 6 years ago, any plant-based foods was really unheard of, and it's come a long way now. And I've got to think, I'm getting old now, my body's falling apart. I've got to think about a better way of training and understanding my body a little bit more. But if I was to be a sportsman again, vegan, and I'd do yoga.
How old are you, Ben?
44.
Yeah, you're young.
But my body's 84.
You're a youngster. Get off. Good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Other chocolate bars are available. So just there you go. That's it from us. We'll see you tomorrow. It's a briefing next.
Bye-bye.
I'm Camilla Tominey. Join me on GB News on Sunday mornings for a politics show with personality on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd